Millennials, what do you want to get off your chest? I'm tired of having to be certified in everything to do something. People from the 80s just had to apply themselves. We have to apply ourselves and stand out in a sea of competition. Even some entry-level administrative positions require certification. Pretty soon I'll need a damn graduate degree to work the drive-thru window. You joke, but I've literally seen job postings for assistant managers at McDonald's that required a business degree. Some days I'm afraid I chose to study engineering more to make money rather than because it's something I'm passionate about, which could result in me having an unfulfilling career wishing I had chosen something else. About $30,000 worth of student loan debt. The new American dream is to find a job you somewhat like for the next 40-plus years that pays decent, has benefits, and allows you to not be in debt. I'm tired of the millennials are entitled and need participation trophies bullcrap argument from baby boomers. You gave us trophies because you couldn't handle that little Jimmy wasn't a superstar and couldn't win anything for you to show off to your baby boomer friends. We all hated participation trophies anyway. I threw all of mine away. I'm Gen Z and I honestly don't like getting medals for being in first place when no one else in my gender and age group even showed up. I hated participation trophies as a kid. I felt like they were saying, well, you tried, better luck next time. Inheriting a house will probably be the only way that I'll be able to get out of a rental property. Then I'll wait to be screwed up by the property taxes here. We went through puberty during the advent of high-speed internet. I'm proud of how we handled that. You know, you're right. I'm damn proud of us for not just failing all of our classes and coming out of our rooms at the end of high school, all pale and with a massive right arm, after days of constant strain. Well done, fellow kids of the 2000s. Stop calling me a fricking millennial like it's a slur. You know what? I'm glad we're killing industries left and right. Most of them are based on bullcrap anyway. I'm not obligated to get ripped off at the mall, fulfill the expectation that I'll spend a ton on a diamond for my wife, or pay casual dining chains premium prices for crap food. Frick them, frick that, glad to be alive and watch them all burn. No, Dad, I won't get a full-time job in my field. Why? Because I've busted my butt to build a freelance portfolio strong enough that I make more money than I would full-time. Your life may be based around the almighty dollar, but mine isn't. I want a content life a heck of a lot more than any full-time job. I frickin' hate working. Why? Because I'm surrounded by frick sticks that think business today is run the same way as it was 50 to 70 years ago. I'd like to thank the people that managed to screw entire generations by adding sugar to everything, even frickin' water. I'm alienating everyone in my life because I work too long. My family thinks I couldn't be bothered to spend time with them, my friends think the same as well. But I need to be able to grind out to establish my career. However, working 14 to 15 hours a day for what equates to minimum wage is destroying my finances, stressing me the frick out, and every single day gets more depressing by the minute. I'm a commercial real estate analyst, working my way into consulting. Only now I'm really debating moving into management consulting, since there, although you work similar hours, you get paid better. The crushing weight of knowing my taxes are going to pay for an unprepared health system to deal with an aging population, the same population that's staying in the workforce longer, keeping us from getting jobs to pay those taxes. Also, it's not that hard to use an iPhone. If I can work it out, so can you. My cat has crystals forming in his bladder. It's infuriating because to hospitalize him will cost at least $1,000 that we just don't have, and vets don't make payment plans. Luckily, the vet took pity on me for literally crying in front of them and did a catheter to clear his urethra and gave me some meds for free. With a diet change, he's doing way better, but it's scary as frick and he isn't out of the woods yet. We need to stop producing plastic. I shouldn't have gone to college. I should have found a trade and stuck with it. I'd be in much better financial shape if I did. The only people I know who are my age and have decent jobs work in some kind of trades, normally CNC machining, and one works in a nut and bolt factory. I was fed the same BS as everyone else. You have to go to college. You don't want to end up as a plumber. I never connected the dots that one of my dad's best friends has made a living for 40 years as a plumber. Frick housing prices. That is all. I remember seeing someone on cable news network talking about how millennials aren't buying homes or new cars because they don't want to. Which, I would love a frickin' house and a new car. Give me more money or make those things cheaper and I'd be thrilled to buy. But I make crap money with student loans to pay off and I can barely afford my apartment. And I drive a piece of crap 2003 that I got for $2,000. To further elaborate, people really misinterpret what we do and don't want. I think most of us do want shiny new things like homes and new cars and to eat out at restaurants all the time and all of that, but we don't do it because it's just not worth it. Those things are very expensive and many of us aren't doing so well financially. It's not necessarily that we can't afford these things. In every case, it's just that the benefits don't outweigh the costs. We can get by with less and still be happy. All of this bullcrap about millennials are killing whatever the topic of the day isn't correct. It's more that those things would kill us financially, mentally, whatever if we were to blindly partake. Things aren't like they were 40 years ago. People need to realize this. It doesn't help that the people who wring their hands about millennials not buying homes are often the exact same people who do everything they can to continually inflate housing prices. A basic house costs way more than it used to in inflation-adjusted dollars. It's not like building a small, affordable home is some sort of lost skill set. If I was to try and build a small starter home, some of the most intense resistance I'd run into would be from local regulations. There are minimum acreage requirements, minimum square footage requirements, all sorts of clutter codes about what you can and can't have in your yard, and that's just at the bare minimum. And were you to try and get rid of these regulations, you'd hear a grand opera of whining about how you're going to drag our sacred property values down. I have a business degree, my fiancé is a lawyer. My education is paid off and we're working on his. I've worked 2 jobs since I came home from college. We don't go on vacations, we cook at home, we cut corners everywhere we can. My ring was gifted to us by a godmother and we drive old cars. The issue is we're paid so little that we couldn't afford to live in a studio apartment and pay utilities, eat, pay car insurance, contribute to our 401ks, and save to eventually purchase a home. There'd be no safety net fund. We'd be scraping by, painfully, and only maybe making minimum payments on his loans. So I'm not sure why choosing to live with our parents while we climb out of student debt and save for a down payment is considered lazy or childish. We certainly don't want to live with them, but mathematically we don't have much of a choice. I'm curious to know what the older generations are getting out of writing these constant articles about what crap decisions we make and how lazy we are. Why we won't leave our parents' homes, blah blah blah. I mean, there's a large collection of reasons they might feel resentment. We do have better stuff available than they did growing up, but also we have a lot of problems that they didn't have, many of which are directly attributable to them, and that some of them just haven't wrapped their heads around. So a few bad actors in the generation have decided that we just have things easier. Also, those of them who are retired have more time to complain. Okay, the narrator will stop now. This is about your complaints. I'm a millennial. I started washing dishes in a mom-and-pop restaurant when I was 13. That was 17 years ago, and I've held a steady job ever since. I moved out of my parents when I was 18, and have supported myself through that steady work alone. I don't own a home, or a new car, or 20 credit cards, and that seems to be an issue for a lot of people. For a very long time in the US, success was measured by things you had. That ideal is fading, and it's making a lot of people very nervous. Millennials aren't buying new cars or purchasing new homes at the rate of previous generations. We're a generation that values experiences over possessions, and that scares a lot of people. I feel that a lot of the hate that's thrown at millennials is due to this. We live in a country ruled and governed by capitalism. A detachment from material things weakens that rule because being able to keep people wanting things is what gives them power. We have it, you want it, keep working, and maybe you'll get it. It's an idea that powered our economy for a long time, and it's becoming antiquated. You know what I want to get off my chest? This shirt. But HR said I'd get in trouble if I did it again. I was born in 1985. I struggled with years of poverty before making full-time with the Postal Service and making decent money. I graduated college and it barely affected my prospects at all. My mother, when she was 19, got drunk and joined the army after dropping out of college. She had a house and vehicle paid off before I was born. Nobody over the age of 40 gets to say crap about responsibility to us. I hate how some people assume it's just so easy to get a great-paying job, especially when you're in college. I live in a relatively small college city, 40,000 people, and unless you're a professor, lecturer, or otherwise work for the university, your choices for work are essentially A, fast food, or B, retail. And even those jobs are getting hard to come by. But a lot of people, especially older generations, just think I'm lazy and don't want to work. No, actually, I'd love a 30 to 40-hour week job paying decent wage that doesn't exist here unless you're working for the school. And I love hearing this little gem too. Walk in, speak to the manager, shake his hand, and give him your resume in person. There's a very good reason that 99.9% of places do their hiring online. It saves time and money. The last time I tried doing what was mentioned here, the manager didn't even accept my resume and just said to apply online. I'm at the point where I'm donating plasma and selling my stuff just to buy food. I really do enjoy avocado toast. I really loathe the way the 50s has been entrenched as the best decade of America by all political groups. It was a flaming disaster of a decade. The bright lights you see from it today are the fires as Europe tried to stay warm during their rebuilding into a functional civilization. So of course the US has tried to keep that decade's policies alive. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. I did a tour in Afghanistan from 2011 to 12, and it was brutal. I lost several friends to overly horrific events. I remember more than one occasion digging through the back of a wrecked truck trying to find the matching body parts of friends I knew so that we could send them home in one piece. I still remember what it was like to have to tap into my inner monster just to survive the ordeal. Now I'm out of the military and going back to college on the GI Bill at 30. I'm trying to reintegrate back into society, but I feel that due to my past experiences and things I've gone through, I'll never be able to relate to normal people again. You can't unsee what you've already seen, and you can't unsee the things you've done to other people in order to survive. I've lost the ability to empathize with the people having a bad day, and I don't know how to accept the help given to me. You know what? Baby boomers don't seem to give a single solitary frick about the well-being of others. They got theirs, they don't care if you get yours. No house, healthcare, or living wages? Sucks to be you. Pop retired at 60 and is still living in his $300,000 house that he bought for $80K, supported by Social Security, Medicare, and dividends from his company-sponsored retirement plan. And anyone who can't become successful nowadays obviously has too little work ethic and too much avocado toast. If a group of lazy, ignorant, and selfish kids can destroy your country, as I've heard it put so many times, then you built a pretty crappy country. The children now live in luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority, they show disrespect for elders, and love chatter in the place of exercise. Said by Socrates. This crap isn't new, bro. Unpopular optimism. When our cohort gets into the peak power ages of 50 through 70, we're going to know so much more than the previous generations did about each other and about the world. I think we'll be better stewards of society and the planet because of how easily and habitually we see the interconnections of people and nature. It won't be everybody, but there'll be more of us that understand what life is like for vastly different people than there ever has been before. I hope that this cultivates a sense of empathy and shared responsibility beyond what previous generations were capable of at those ages. The narrator likes this opinion. I'm a fan of pragmatic optimism and the fact that every generation is shaped by their experiences. We've had a lot of comments here about how tough a lot of our generation have it now. Let's hope we can apply that to making sure the next generation has it better. I don't want kids. Don't tell me it'll change or you'll want family when you get older. I don't want kids. That hasn't changed for years. I had an older coworker that kept saying that people my age don't want a house, kids, marriage, and just want to live with their parents and travel and buy stuff. I always felt like crying whenever she said that because I feel like I'll never be able to afford a house or kids. All I've ever wanted to do was raise a family in my own home. I'm just about to turn 32 and I've moved in with my significant other and his mum so that I can have a chance to make significant savings. I haven't been able to keep a job in almost 3 years due to layoffs, affecting each company I've started at. Always being the newest hire, I'm out the door first. Now I'm currently temping and hoping I can land something permanent. It's hard to feel hopeful lately. As a minority, I don't understand why the extreme left wants me to hate all white people and vilify them. I judge people by their character, not their skin tone. I don't generalize a group, and I treat people like individuals. That being said, I'm not delusional enough to think that we'll all be smoking a doobie around a campfire singing Kumbaya. Nonetheless, I'd like a sense of equity among people and not a concentration of power within a group. Let's end racism, sexism, and homophobia. It's obnoxious to always be grouped in with the stereotype of millennials, constantly judged by older people who see themselves as better just because they were born at a different time. Having said that, the few people who actually match the millennial stereotype really suck. I'm so tired of baby boomers or Gen X people getting on my case as to why I don't have kids or why I'm not married. 1. I don't need a child to give meaning to my life. My job gives me meaning in my life, Linda. 2. I wouldn't want to settle for less than what I deserve and end up in a crap marriage with someone who treats me like garbage. Linda, you fricking idiot. Right now, I want to get my bra off because it's pinching me. Dear older generations, you can't accuse millennials of killing industries when you guys caused the economic crashes that murdered businesses left, right, and center. Also, stop accusing us of entitlement and selfishness for wanting a well-paid job with reasonable hours that let us afford our own flats and houses. I remember using a phone that was attached to a wall. I remember using floppy disks. I remember playing outside with my friends. I remember not being glued to a device 24/7. I'm 27. It's annoying when people think that we didn't know what life was like before technology became popular. It makes me sad that we're the generation that knows climate change is happening and still just want to keep consuming like all the past generations. Our grandparents really had no idea. Our parents were starting to see, but now it's a blatant, undeniable fact, yet most of us still go out and buy the latest consumer trending bullcrap like it was candy. Frick college debt. Frick that crap. Millennials are killing off this or that. Frick you rich old jerks. How about you all make some paying jobs, damn it? Sorry, we shipped that job overseas. So many things. First off, I hate being clumped into the stereotypical depiction of a millennial. I hate people assuming I'm a princess who doesn't know how to do anything herself. Sure, there are a ton of things I don't know how to do, which I ask for help with so I can learn how to do them myself. But suddenly, me not knowing how to do certain things turns me into a spoiled princess because I ask my father to help me? It's not like I'm asking him how I fold my fricking clothes. I'm asking for help managing my fricking student loans and how to properly use a credit card. Second off, I'm sorry I fricking care about the environment. The UK needs a savage cold snap to correct the attitudes of the elderly. Oh, who am I kidding? It won't work though. The winter fuel allowance will save them, even the rich ones. Back off, Dad. Nothing gets between me and my fidget spinner and Jimmy Neutron. If there's still genuinely someone the narrator's age watching Jimmy Neutron and using a fidget spinner, you're hilarious and thank you for putting down the toy to type your comment. Yes, I know your generation, baby boomers and older, used to be able to go wherever and stay out late and play in the streets, but it's no longer safe for the new generations to do, and it's because of the crap you guys did. Thanks, Susan, for raising crappy kids who don't take responsibility for their actions. Also, if you're going to spend a good 20+ minutes talking about how kids nowadays are too attached to their tablets and smartphones, don't ask me to fix your stuff when it stops working. Read a book, go outside, take a long walk off a short pier. I'm seriously considering what an economical or ecological collapse looks like for my children. I don't even know where to start. Was basically forced into college as the first in my family to do so, ended up having no idea what I really wanted to do, like most young people, so I spent 6 years getting a bachelor's and master's degree in a subject that has very crappy prospects for a well-paying career. Now I have over 80k in debt with no career prospects. Top that off with depression, anxiety, and the general pains of love and life, and I have thoughts of self-deletion daily. Older generations call us lazy and entitled, but I, and a majority of my friends, are doing the following. 1. Working for a 4-year degree that will never be good enough, so we have to plan for a master's program, thus throwing us another 60k into debt that we can't afford, but we can't find any jobs to even put a dent in the debt because any job that will help us is looking for master's degrees or 5 years of experience. And 2, working full-time on top of being a full-time college student at minimum wage jobs so we can afford to survive. My separated parents' families are in no positions to help me out financially, so I'm on my own. We're all frickin' burnt out because of the stress of having to go to school and work a full-time job that's killing us. That's 8 hours of work, 6 hours of school and 2 hours of homework, and 8 hours of maybe sleep, leading to clinical depression and anxiety, which just piles up. Everybody's talking about war, the conflict in other countries, and political drama. I honestly have no idea what the frick is going on. If someone could sum it all up, that'd be pretty nice. I'm sick of going to stores and seeing a single cashier working at the registers, or going to a restaurant and seeing a single gosh darn server working all 40 tables. I'm sick of getting crap service, and I'm sick of thinking about the poor people who are getting worked to death just because companies have discovered it's okay to overwork one person and pay them a crappy wage, instead of hiring 2 people to work normally and pay them respectable wages. I can't imagine how selfish the people at these companies would have to be to promote such awful treatment of staff simply to satisfy their shareholders. It's all about money, money, money. For frick's sake. I hope that there's a huge reckoning for all of these butthole corporations one day. I have my popcorn ready. Don't worry, fellow millennials, when the previous generations die, we'll get to rewrite the history books, and I'm certain we'll uncover some unsavory treatment that will make the current lambasting of our generation seem quaint. I'm not going to necessarily follow the traditional American dream path like my parents, i.e. getting married, buying a house, staying at the same job for life, having a bunch of kids and buying a new car. Older people look at me like I'm crazy because my husband and I would rather rent and go on vacations than buy a house, settle down and have kids. Those things might come eventually, but for now I'm happy doing my own thing. What things do guys do to impress girls that make them cringe? This might just be me, but talking about how much you work out. Sometimes it's not even subtle. In the middle of a conversation about Harold and Kumar, please don't shout, "And I can bench press like 130 pounds. I just thought you should know." Also, sending a friend over to talk to me for you. I thought that sort of thing would stop well after high school. I'm amazed how many guys my age still do this. Shyness can be sweet, but really? I'm not going to eat you. Also, please don't tell me that, for a girl, I'm actually really cool. Oh, and guys, I know that's not a lot of weight. That's just a random example. I have no idea if the last guy who said that actually said 130 pounds or not. I'm exaggerating. Sheesh. When I didn't have a 360, I played the Mass Effect series at the rec center at my school. In the heat of a battle in ME2, this bespectacled young man sits next to me and informs me that I'm using my sniper rifle wrong. It's okay though, because he's here to help. Actually, people have paid him for his video gaming advice before, so I'm lucky to get it for free. As if that weren't obnoxious enough though, he talked all the way through the cutscene where Legion joins your party. Constant sexual talk. I'm quite open to flirting, sexy talk sometimes, but it doesn't have to be a part of every single conversation. One time a guy was showing me some pictures he took on his phone. As he's scrolling, tons of nudes from other girls pop up in his camera roll. Like, WTF, dude. This is our first date. I don't want to see sketchy pictures like that. At least save them to another album. When they try to impress me with their knowledge without taking my own into consideration. For example, this guy recently tried hitting on me in a parking lot. He then started giving me bad car advice, and it was obvious that I knew more than him about mechanics. I'm a grad student. I've had guys try to explain my own research systems to me. My mathematical models in disease ecology. My next degree will be biology, but I have a math degree. I use a lot of differential equations and dynamical systems. A lot of guys I talk to about it see me as a big-eyed bio major who's intimidated by math and try to help me understand my own questions. Come to art school. We're almost proud of the fact that we have no idea what you're talking about. Yes, the cliché of academic young men trying to lecture women on systems that the women themselves created is actually a very common one, especially on Twitter. Do better, supposedly educated men. Immediately bragging or showing off within 5 minutes of conversation. That includes how much you make, your job, etc. One guy at a bar last week grabbed my arm to shout in my ear, "I had cancer when I was a kid." Yeah, don't do that. Tell me how many girls they've slept with. Most of the time they're lying, and if they aren't, then ooh. Eggplant pics. I'm 37 on OkCupid, and 2 days ago, a guy tried to send me one a day after we'd exchanged phone numbers to arrange a date. He's in his late 30s or early 40s. Seriously, dude, we haven't even met. What the frick? When they bash on women, it literally makes no sense, but it's so common. Especially an ex. So tacky. No, I didn't ask about her. And no, I don't care how much of a loose woman you think some other girl is. If you bash other women, chances are you speak in a derogatory manner about me to your buddies. Discuss their muscles, their sexual prowess, how much they can drink before puking, how much they drank last night before they puked. But, the gun show. Does anyone know a plumber? 'Cause these pipes are about to burst. Start rejection flex. Want to see how many push-ups I can do? Sit on my back and hold my protein shake. I actually saw a guy do this and it worked. The girl loved it. The guy was me. I'd try this, but I don't think 0 is an impressive number. Trash talk my significant other as if that will make me change my mind and hop on your eggplant instead. I once had a guy ask me about my boyfriend. When I finished describing him and our relationship, he took a beat and then said, "He sounds like a great person. Why don't you dump him and go out with a 0? It didn't work, but I gave him points for making me laugh a little. Hey baby, have you ever hit rock bottom? He wore a shirt with 2 arrows pointing to his biceps that said, "Welcome to the gun show." Cringe and laugh. I have a shirt with 2 arrows pointing to my biceps that says, "Obama can't take these guns. How hard did your panties hit the floor?" Flaunting their wealth. I'm sure that's a turn-on for some girls, but for me and most people I know, it just screams D-bag. These are the same guys who whine about how all the women they date are gold diggers. No crap, dummy. To clarify, there are so many responses asking what I mean by flaunting. It's not douchey to have money or to spend money on nice things. It is douchey to brag about how much money you make and the nice things you own, to make a big show of spending your money so everyone can see how rich you are, or to act as though being wealthy somehow makes you better than those around you. I'm a college student, so when I see guys doing this, I assume 90% of the time it's their parents' money anyway, which makes it seem even more pathetic. I flaunt my Costco membership because it's my life's greatest achievement. Am I safe? I wouldn't date a guy for his money, but a Costco membership? I would genuinely consider it. I may have detracted a little from serious points, but in fairness, the banter going on underneath all of the posts is very self-effacing and good-natured. Crazy driving. Maybe once I've known you for a while and understand that you have total control of your car, I'll be more comfortable with you driving fast and reckless. But until then, showing me how you can drift around a corner just makes me think you're being reckless with my life. Please stop. The biggest one for me is lying about things he's into just because I said I was into those things. If you've never seen Blade Runner, for example, don't say you have seen it just because it's my favorite film. I can always tell when they're lying about this, and I don't think it's sweet. Another thing is demanding to pay for everything. I appreciate when guys pay, but I like to pay once in a while too. This isn't the 1950s, and I have a job, so let me treat sometimes. I want to clarify that I do appreciate being treated to drinks, dinner, etc. Who wouldn't? It's only when I offer to pay and my date refuses to allow this when I cringe. I don't think this behavior is super common, but I have experienced it with at least 2 separate guys. Just my preference, and it makes me feel good to be able to treat my date sometimes. I once went on a second date with a guy who came to pick me up. I live in apartments and try to be super considerate of my neighbors all the time. As soon as I get in his car, he starts revving his engine super loud. A, I am not impressed by that whatsoever, and B, I'm sure none of my neighbors appreciated the noise either. This was our last date. This goes right along with speaker systems in a car. Please don't blow my eardrums out listening to your crappy music on my first date. When they say, I could be with any girl right now, but I chose you. God bless you. Oh my God, so blessed. When guys give me a resume or tell me why I should date them, I'm real buff, I'll treat you real nice, I'll make lots of money, and I'll buy you gifts. Like I'm some sort of shallow, brainless twit that is looking to hire a boyfriend. I dropped my monster condom for my magnum dong. I don't like loud, obnoxious guys. Sure, if I were at a bar and you're drunk and yelling, that's one thing. But to just be loud and obnoxious at all times embarrasses me. If we're getting coffee, the people at the other end of the patio shouldn't know what we're talking about. Went out with a dude I got set up with. He seemed okay, albeit not my type. But I'm like, whatever, we'll eat and have an alright time. Nope. We get to the restaurant and as soon as our Latina waitress leaves, he starts spewing all this garbage about Mexicans, saying they're lazy and that he wanted a new server. Awful. I looked at him and went, Lamento que te sientas así, and broke out of there. Translated, I'm sorry you feel that way. In conclusion, racism does not make me wet.
Racism, not good. Okay, I'm gonna need more notes. Physical assault on the first date, yes or no? Holy crap, I'm so happy I don't do any of these things.
0 out of 0 is still undefeated. Equating their worth or validity as a human being with their car in any way whatsoever. Its make, its model, its size, etc. I once had someone introduce themselves to me as, I'm so-and-so, and I drive a Lamborghini. He was bright, intelligent, charming, and successful, and didn't have a clue about himself. If a guy is trying to impress me, I'm probably too busy being impressed that they're making the effort. Having said that, the last guy to chat me up kept bringing up the fact that he's read all of the Game of Thrones books, and so he's never surprised by the TV show. I failed to see why this was such a huge point of pride, but I guess literacy is never a bad thing. Well, there's our very low benchmark for the evening, gentlemen. Basic literacy. I once had a guy tell me way too many giraffe jokes, but I forgave him because he was hot. I try and avoid giraffe jokes, not just on dates either, because I'm always worried the joke will be way over someone's head, and then I would feel bad.
You son of a B-word.
1. For some reason, at the university I go to, it's a really big thing for guys to brag about how broke they are. This is almost always at the bars when they're spending copious amounts of money on drinks.
Oh man, I'm so broke. I have like no money, and that's why I'm drinking Hams all night.
It's not impressive, and coming from a low-income background, it tees me off. No, you're not broke, and if you are, it's only because you're walking around in expensive clothes and going to bars every night. People who are actually dirt poor do not brag about it. Why is this a thing to brag about? 2. Trying to act like they know more about a subject than they really do. People know when you're bullcrapping. I respect people for more humbly saying, I don't really know very much about that, so I can't comment. In the same vein, acting like there's no possible way I could know more about math or science or politics than them because of my chest and hoo-ha. 3. Wow, girls who look like you aren't usually this smart. Good for you. Why would you want to worry your pretty little head with grad school? Negging is not a good strategy for picking up quality women. Move on to the fall-over drunk ones who are barely coherent enough to notice how awful you are if you want to continue these actions. Pictures of your junk. You're gross. Thank you. Unless I ask for one, I don't want your junk in my inbox. I think some men love their eggplants and want to show it off as if we give a crap. I love my member, but I love pooping too, and nobody sends vines of that. The whole, but I'm a nice guy act. If you were really a nice guy, you wouldn't have to tell that. There was this guy at my college for a semester that would lift his shirt and show girls his third nipple. We all thought he had Asperger's, so it was really painful to watch. Was his name Andrew? My friend likes to do that at the bar. and the guy with the glass eye always one-ups him and takes his eye out.
I seriously want to hang out at this bar.
Constantly call me sexy, beautiful, etc. when we've just met. Example, hey, what's up? I think you're sexy as hell. We should hang out. It makes me feel like a piece of meat and it makes you look shallow. Follow me around the gym and strategically place yourself where I can see you lift. I'm busy, bro. Also, to the guy who found it necessary to do one-armed rows at the foot of my bench with 100-pound dumbbells, you drop it on my foot and I will end you. Not impressive, annoying as frick. Try to sound too intelligent in conversations or text by throwing an excess amount of uncommonly used words. Usually this happens discussing things I like, as if they're trying to one-up me on their knowledge of the topic or impress me with the fact that they like it too. Keyword here is excess. Large vocabularies are nice, genuine intelligence is obvious, but we can all spot those compensating, arrogant ones. Picking up a guitar during a party and playing Wonderwall. FYI, I'm not a girl, but I cringe when guys think that would actually impress a girl. Guys who say they're musicians or guitarists who oh so casually bring their guitars and play some annoying crap not very well. That drove me nuts in college and high school. I remember being really impressed when I started dating a guy who had never mentioned he was a guitarist until months in, and then when he played it, it wasn't to show off, and he was also really good. I married that guy. When I'm at a party and a guitar comes out, it's no longer even up for debate whether this is cringe to do. In fact, for most of my friends and I, there's a very clear eye roll that goes around that room. As a woman of circa 30 with a big chest, I've seen a lot of these. Some of the things that guys think will impress me are truly bizarre, and I can only assume they're ideas they found in some Mars or Venus bullcrap and legitimized by women who act like impressionable idiots as part of their flirting strategy. General alpha behaviors. Yes, you may be stronger than me, but wrenching things out of my hands because let man do the job, or telling me what I think or should think is not something that will get you under my skirt. Following up on that, aggression and hostility towards others, especially other men. You think I need protection? Okay, fine. You think you need to pound your chest and bare your teeth at every passing male? I'm out. Bad-mouthing other women. You may think that telling me about that one chick who was so ugly and fat will be hilarious, and will suggest to me that I'm not ugly and fat and we can laugh at her together, right? All it suggests is that you're an abrasive butthole. Also, sexism. Yes, there are men who think that dropping remarks like, women should not be allowed to drive, will make me feel so awesome that despite their hatred for all that is female, they will stoop to interacting with me, or something, dunno. Bragging. If you're out doing cool stuff, I will want to hear about it. But cool stuff does not become cooler when you adopt a condescending, braggart tone. I have a friend who travels a lot, and he can always tell you what he saw and why he did think that particular spot was interesting. And he tells you how cool these places were, not how cool he is for having gone there. Whether you're skydiving or playing League of Legends, tell me how great that activity is, not how great you are. Speaking of negative behavior as if it were good, the fact that you got blackout drunk or do drugs or have beaten someone, have hurt someone, slept with a girl and never returned her calls, broken the law while driving, is not a good thing. Quit behaving as if it was a good thing. I can go on like this, but I think I'll stop. One-upping traditionally male interests. So, what did you get up to this weekend? Me. Nothing much. Some video games, hanging out with my cat. What games do you play? RPGs mostly. I was playing Skyrim. RPGs are so lame, but I love gaming. I was playing COD with my buddies the other day, and it was sick. This is very annoying, but also just one-upping in general makes me angry. I went on a date with a guy who literally after I said anything, he stated how he was better, or that doesn't beat what happened to him type of thing. You think making me feel inferior is impressive, pal? It's not. At the end of the date, I said I'd say goodbye, but you probably do that better too. He laughed and asked when we could meet again. We never met again. Went on one date with a guy. He'd been an extra in some movie where he'd actually had a line addressed to the main character. Now, don't get me wrong, that's neat and we're seeing the movie after dinner for just that 15-second part. But the guy seriously couldn't talk about anything else unless it was how famous he is now or the autographs he thought he'd be signing after we watched it. He spent the entire meal talking about himself and this 2 days of his life. I only felt a little bad when we watched the movie and his scene had been cut. Tell me they're in the army or a marine. Automatic turn-off. On the other hand, if they don't tell me and it comes up in conversation later, it's not a turn-off. I'm just used to the type that within 5 seconds of meeting them, you know what branch they're in and so on. Many in my comments are getting defensive and saying, oh, should I not tell you my profession then? It's my life, you're a B-word, etc. Remember this thread is about what guys do to impress girls, so in that context is what I'm referring to. I can tell the difference if they're doing it to impress me or not. Don't worry. Hey girl, I've spent 4 years dodging bullets for your freedom. Navy radar operator. Milady? Ah, how fedorable. And now, just a quick intermission of comments from men reading the thread for advice. I solve all of these problems by not being able to talk to women in the first place. I'm perfect.
Sounds like I just need to get over the whole approach anxiety, and I should be set for a good time, judging from the stupid crap my competitors are pulling. Holy moly.
Oh my god, the stories in this thread are making me sound amazing. Hello, ladies.
Quick, guys, take down notes of everything not to do. I really hate it when the guy is spending a minute looking at his notepad in between every sentence he says.
Walking up to a girl who is just relaxing and telling her to smile. Get the frick out of here. It's not cute or endearing. I don't really want to be with a man who's already correcting me and we aren't even acquaintances. Sod right off. Trying to be classy when it's time for adult fun times. It's just creepy. True story, my now husband and I were getting busy in the shower. He was giving me some finger action, and after checking out the goods, he blurted out, you're really starting to blossom. The muffin shop immediately closed its doors until further notice over that little chestnut. I really wasn't into screwing with my creepy uncle that night. Lately, the moron fest for me has been online dating. People with zero social skills. If I message someone, I damn well read their profile first. I try to find some common ground, ask profile-based questions. That seems like basic interaction 101. But so much, you're really hot, one-liners, boring. Or asking the random, pointless or ridiculous questions like, what's your favorite color? Well, that's a freaking essential starting point for a relationship, isn't it? If I say orange, we obviously can't go further. Or worse still, a really cringy attempt to be all random lols, questions about what we would do together in space with a unicorn and a cheese sandwich or something. Just no. WTF. Okay, this isn't that common, but I just have to throw it out there. What in the frick is up with guys lifting their shirts casually to show their stomachs, usually while licking their lips? I don't care if you have six-pack abs. That just makes you look stupid. Not to mention, it's usually done by guys that don't really have a great pack of abs. Just stop. Number 1. Negging. They assume that not only will it work, but that somehow I don't read books or use the internet enough to know why they're insulting me. It never makes you look good. It makes you look like a pretentious, misogynistic d-bag who gets dating advice from online forums, which assume women are inherently predictable and easy to target. Number 2. Telling me women who are as smart as me don't usually look like I do. Maybe women in graduate school aren't there as decorations. Number 3. Complaining about how crazy your ex or all of your exes were. Bad-mouthing your ex makes me think you have a poor choice in women and will also probably bad-mouth me when I'm not around. Maybe all of your exes are crazy, but the common denominator is you. Number 4. Continuously trying to make physical contact when I'm openly uncomfortable. I went out with a guy and we were supposed to meet a bunch of people for a law school dinner, and at the last minute he just asked me to go to dinner alone. Whatever, I went. All dinner long, he kept trying to get me to drink more, complained about his exes, and kept trying to play footsie with me until I was in a contorted position to avoid his feet. It was awful. Which reminds me, number 5. Do not pressure me to drink more. That's not only disrespectful, it comes off really creepy. What have you witnessed someone do that made you realize he or she is really, really smart? My wife's grandfather. He's a retired electrical engineer with a dozen patents to his name and a long list of recognitions I can't be bothered to remember or name. I always knew he was brilliant, but never realized just how, until one day last year when we were visiting and he got a phone call. Keep in mind, he's been retired for 20 years and is 86 years old. The phone call was from an electrical engineering firm from halfway across the globe, asking if they could fly him out to a site and have him consult on the energy capture of a hydroelectric dam they were building. They'd run into the problem that none of them, all electrical engineers, could solve. They had consulted 3 of the top-related university departments in the US on the issue, and the last one had referred them to him. 20 minutes on the phone and he agreed to think about it. 2 days later, he had solved their issue and written the solution on a single 8x11 sheet of paper, which he scanned and emailed to the company. He said he took so long to write it up because he didn't want to have to fly all the way there at his age. His explanation was so clear I was able to understand it and follow it with no relevant higher education. I spent a year trying to track down an intermittent issue on my car. An older gentleman on the forum had suggested a likely cause, but I disregarded it as the parts had been replaced. Sure enough, he was right, and I managed to follow from that to find the other half of the problem. I'd had a mechanic look at it, I'd spent hours tearing my hair out trying to fix it. Nothing worked prior to that. Respect your elders, folks. One time, my drunk uncle was in jail and needed bail money. And being that my dad was the only one in the family with any real savings, they all looked to him to fork up 100% of the cash. Having been asked, he realized this situation had 2 possible outcomes. 1, pay for his bail and never get the money back. 2, not pay for the bail and have the whole family blame him for it. So my dad decided to throw them a curveball. He told them that whatever the rest of the family raised for the bail, he'd not only match it, he'd offer double what they'd raised together. Nobody offered 1 cent. Blame averted. I'm quite amused by how funny everyone else has found this. I'm going to tell my dad about this later. He'll think it's hilarious too. Depending on how high the bail was, I do understand this, and what a great way to avoid sanctimonious judgment from the other family cheapskates. Sorry, drunk brother. Have a fun night in the clinker. My husband and I aren't sophisticated. At night we wind down by watching Family Guy, etc. Although it's worthy to note, he watches shows about how anything is made or done, etc. He drinks a beer at night after work and loves his old favourite shirt, this flannel with holes in it. Anyway, we're at my in-laws' place where everyone we're possibly connected to are there. A quiz show comes on, and it seems like a good idea to do trivia in partners. I say yes, knowing that we're up against professors, doctors, and hospital directors, and we're going down. Not only did my husband answer all the questions first and correct, he beat everyone. It all came to an end when he chugged his beer and burped really loud. My husband is successful in his field, especially with numbers and measurement types of things, but I never realized how much information he retains. I just kind of thought he was smart about the industry he worked in. My old roommate George is one of my best friends. He's one of the dumbest people I've ever met. We both ordered Chinese food one night and got the same thing, General Tso's chicken combo with pork fried rice and an egg roll. We both got Cokes, we were both walking back from the takeout place, getting a little giddy about eating our food back at our place. We sit at the table and he opens the bag. His face grows stern as his brow furrows.
Which one is mine?
What? Like, which meal? He continued as he looked up at me. Bro, we got the same food, whichever one you want. I know, but like, which one is mine? The conversation went on for about 5 more minutes before I just took my meal and we watched Adventure Time. Oh no, frick, I misread the title. I'm gonna leave my post here anyway. Here's my other George story. George always tries to give something up for Lent because God is always watching. He told me once after he took a hit from his bowl. One year it was beer, another it was only skipping class once a week instead of 3 times. He lasted maybe 3 days on that one. One year he gave up KFC. We lived about a block away from a KFC/Taco Bell, which he frequented about as much as he got high. Anyway, no KFC for 40 days or God will smite him. Bro, I want to do it to prove myself, you know? So I gave up whiskey and vodka to make it a team effort. We're in it together, type of deal. The next day I come home after class and see him laying on the couch like Kate Winslet in Titanic, with his shirt off, gouging into a box of frickin' Popeye's fried chicken from a block the other direction. He saw how disappointed I was. But I'm still good, dude. It's Popeyes, see? He said, wiping the grease from his face with his sock. I had a teacher in high school that using both hands could write a sentence starting from the beginning and end simultaneously. He even split the middle word of the sentence. He also spoke around 5 languages. What the frick?
A witch! Obviously.
Older brother always was terrible at school. I remember him straight up asking why he needed to graduate high school and then again in college. He accepted a low-level job after graduation in marketing that ultimately fell apart due to the company executives screwing up big time. During all of it, he was somehow able to keep a small client, and within 7 months of working, was promoted to their executive marketing director, making 6 figures. Now he has multiple clients on the side and is always scheming something up. Dude is as hard-headed as they come, but nonetheless a darn marketing genius. Blows my mind how far he's come. I was once in Chinatown and I saw this old Chinese guy with a bunch of groceries. He had tied the bags together by the handle and slung them over his shoulder. He looked ridiculous. The next week I was struggling with a lot of groceries and I remembered the old Chinese guy. Stopped on the sidewalk, tied all my bags together and walked home like the unencumbered dork I became that day. When my friend, who is a prodigy at school and everything he does, chose to go to a music college to learn piano jazz, when he could have been a neurosurgeon or an astronaut. While I knew he was smart before, that made me realize that apart from being good at memorizing stuff, he could also realize that good grades don't mean you can be a doctor or a scientist. They mean you can do whatever you want, prestigious or not, and that he could see what would make him the happiest. In my book, he went from a smart student to one of the great minds I've ever talked to. Carpe diem, jazz genius, good for you. We should all aspire to do the career that makes us happy. There's even the old cliche about it meaning we never have to work a day in our lives, which is debatable, by the way. Finally, something I can contribute to. Back in college, I had 3 roommates, an engineer major, pre-med, and pharmacy major. Let's call him Ray. Ray met his girlfriend freshman year, and they dated throughout undergrad and PharmD school. Our school had an intense pharmacy program, and we see students working and studying their butts off. Ray's girlfriend always set up these study groups and invited Ray. But Ray never attended and would lie to his girlfriend that he was studying on his own. The roommates and I know what's up. Ray was always in his room playing video games, watching TV, movies. The guy never talked about class, but he attended every session and lab. Every midterm he took, he aced, and that really teed off his girlfriend and pharmacy friends. The crowning moment that I knew this guy was a genius happened during sophomore year spring finals. I was up late studying, and Ray was on his computer playing Counter-Strike. He suddenly got up, went to his closet, pulled out one of his textbooks, took off the shrink wrap, and looked at a page, put the book back in the closet, and resumed playing Counter-Strike. I was like, dude, what the frick? He said he had a final in the morning and forgot a compound formula and had to look it up. I lived with this guy for another 2 years and he never studied, and textbooks were still shrink-wrapped up. Not a person, but my parents' old dog. My mum could get bones from the butcher shop for their dog. They were long enough that the dog couldn't get all the marrow out of the center. The dog figured out that only my stepdad's truck was heavy enough to break them after experimenting with the other vehicles at the house. There was usually a bone in the same spot in the driveway every time I went home. This reminds me of crows dropping nuts on crosswalks. Or the guy who created a machine that would dispense a peanut when a coin was put in and trained the crows to do so. The crows left and bought him a crap ton of loose change. I knew 2 guys in undergraduate who would play mental chess. As they'd passed in the hall, one of them would say, "Knight to Queen 3, or whatever. The other guy would roll back his eyes for a second and then nod to acknowledge the move. Both guys then kept walking in opposite directions. Later that day, when they passed again, the second guy would declare his counter-move. A game could last days, and they never forgot where any of their pieces were. Each had a mental image of the board. Sure, they might have been faking, but these guys were always first and second place on the dean's honor list for all 3 years of my undergraduate. I knew them pretty well. I think the mental chess was legit. Most really good players can do this. Once someone becomes familiar enough with the game, it becomes a lot easier to recognize the patterns. Of course, intelligence is required and advantageous to get good at chess. It's true. They did a study where they had master and up-level players look at chess positions that had been arrived at by an actual game for a few seconds, and then try and recreate the board from memory. They all did phenomenally well, and for the most part could always recreate the board. Then they did the same thing with non-chess players, and they weren't nearly as good. Then they did the same thing with randomly generated board positions that hadn't been arrived at by a game. The masters were still better at recreation, but the gap had significantly narrowed, and they no longer recreated them with 100% accuracy. I was at my desk waiting to make a purchase over the phone, and I mentioned to a coworker that I always have to pull my credit card out. I should have this number memorized by now. Another coworker overheard that and said, "I know your Visa number," and spit it right out. After I got off the phone, I asked him, "What the frick?" He said he heard me say it a couple of weeks earlier. Numbers just stick with him that way. I always knew he was a very bright guy, but that took it up a notch.
I'd ask him very politely not to ruin your life.
I envy people with this sort of eidetic memory so much. I would never forget my many passwords again. Small ambitions, people. Sitting in a best friend's apartment on the East Coast in the mid-1980s. He's working on some code on a prototype Unix workstation that MIPS had given him. He runs his program and it produces an answer, then runs it again and produces a different answer. Thinks about it for a minute and pronounces, "The CPU is broken." Right, the CPU is broken. Never heard that one before. Has it occurred to you that... Yes, it had occurred to him. Went through 3 or 4 scenarios, then he pulled out the machine-level debugger and started stepping through the code. Look, right there. The flags weren't updated right in this instruction. Yeah, whatever. He sends an email on the brand new internet to MIPS. Gets a response the next day. "Oh, you have that CPU. We verified your issue. We will put a replacement in the mail promptly." His CPU was broken. 30 minutes from diagnosis to request to repair. For the layman, coding and debugging can be quite complex, seeing as the process is essentially many different moving components working at the same time. When a bug occurs, such as getting different outputs from the same input as the guy above described, as a coder you assume 99% of the bugs arise from the code, since it's often very prone to failure. If it's not a code problem, then you blame the compiler, or perhaps the operating system you're working on, or a mixture of the OS, the compiler, and the code. Very rarely do you blame the hardware because it's simply very rare for hardware problems to affect the output of a piece of code without it being seemingly obvious that it's a hardware problem, like in this case. Thus, the fact that this guy's friend was capable of deducing that the CPU was having problems with whatever specific Unix workstation he is working with by only analyzing the inputs and outputs of a piece of code is very impressive. When you sit down for a meeting for work where you're trying to solve a big problem and someone can say, "That's the wrong question," you need to be asking. People who can say that generally understand the bigger question and all the various variables and factors in play and how everything fits together. It's some next level action to watch the entire room go, "Wow, we're looking at trees and that guy's looking at the forest." I accidentally got a promotion literally yesterday doing something like this. I'm a contract attorney doing doc review and randomly get an email saying they're going to bring in 20% of people for conversations. I immediately crap my pants and assume I'm in trouble. My initial reaction is, well, crap, if I had more frequent feedback, I could code documents accurately with better consistency. Sort of pack a parachute for if they ask why I'm screwing up. Turns out the meeting is just a sample of people they want to ask about how management was doing, if we had the right tools, if we had too many meetings, if we needed something. Blah blah, basically just getting feedback about how the project is going. Since I already have my previous excuse on deck, I just sort of blurt it out. The dude seems really interested and takes a bunch of notes. Fast forward to yesterday. I get an email saying they want another meeting. They made me a fricking quality control team leader reviewing and managing a group of like 15 people because apparently I have such a deep insight into the importance of quality feedback in maintaining consistency. In conclusion, in a panicky attempt to push blame aside, I cheat-coded the right set of buzzwords to finagle a promotion I have no business having.
Anybody who can explain highly complex things very simply. It takes an intelligent person to understand it, but it takes a brilliant person to grasp it so fully they can dumb it down to explain it to anybody. I think it was Feynman who tried to write an introductory textbook on some obscure topic and concluded that more research was needed because he was unable to explain the topic simply enough. David Goodstein asked him to explain the spin statistics theorem in an undergraduate lecturer in the 1960s and 70s. Sizing up his audience perfectly, Feynman says, "I'll prepare a freshman lecture on it." But he comes back a few days later to say, "I couldn't do it. I couldn't reduce it to the freshman level. That means we don't really understand it." This seems to have motivated his 1986 Dirac lecture on spin statistics theorem. I feel like this gives me good cause to blame all teachers in my life for simply not being intelligent enough to explain the subject to me in a way that I understand. Actually, maybe this is a dangerous excuse to give to the less intelligent among us. A kid in second grade already knew algebra. Everyone knew he was smart. For April Fool's Day that year, our teacher decided to be cute and give us a pop quiz, so she went to the 8th grade class and asked for an algebra test, made copies and handed them out to us. Some of the kids were freaking out, and the teacher assured us that we had already went over this. So she left the room and some of the kids are crying. She came back in after a few minutes and said that it was a joke, but she graded the tests anyway. The smart kid scored an 18 out of 20. My dad had a business trip in Seattle that I tagged along on so I could see a soccer match and explore the city. He invited me to go to the research hospital with him one day, and I agreed. They were working on testing some type of cardiovascular tool on a cadaver that they would stimulate blood flow in to test. Seeing my dad, who didn't go to college, barely graduated from high school and lived on welfare with a single mum, and who knocked up a teenage girl when he was a teenager himself, perform surgery on a cadaver using a tool he invented that could potentially save thousands of lives, blew my mind. He had hundreds of patents on devices. I got surgery 3 years ago and my shoulder surgeon used a tool he invented in the 90s. He's an incredibly smart and hardworking man who got just the right amount of luck to get him where he is today. I like it when you meet someone whose English is imperfect, but you realize they're very intelligent and are able to explain their thoughts. I remember once meeting a Japanese archaeologist who wasn't the best English speaker, but when he explained his research to me, it was absolutely fascinating. There was this dude I worked with ages ago who emigrated from China. The higher-ups would get pretty frustrated with him because he was constantly coming up with clever ideas and interesting new ways to do things, but they just wanted to keep the status quo. Some ideas were decent, others likely were brilliant. Anyhow, his spoken English was downright brutal. His written English was perfectly fine though. Eventually he left, probably out of frustration. Got to plug my dad here. Had some friends over, and just to mess around, we asked him the definition of random words in the dictionary. We opened it to the eyes and asked the question of 10 to 12 letter, 3 to 4 syllable words. Not only did he nail all of them, but most definitions were verbatim. When he got to the 10th word, he goes, "The verb or the noun?" And we lost our crap. It was seriously ridiculous. We were freshmen in high school and could hardly pronounce the words we'd picked. Turns out he read the whole dictionary over the summer when he was 16 and bored. Guy is still the smartest person I've ever met. Wife is smart, like 6 languages, fluently smart without breaking a sweat. Has never not done well in school, always gets promoted, etc., etc. But no one in my family saw this because she's an introvert and tries to keep herself dumb so people get her and like her. My family and I are smart. She's next level up. So after we got engaged, family had a get-together. As in cousins, friends, lots of people. As usual, we played some group games. She was reluctant, but I pulled her aside and asked her to try and fit in. She obliged, but was annoyed with me. Started with Pictionary. She schooled everyone in the room. Moved to a bunch of card games with a single deck. Counted cards, knew everyone else's decks, etc. Quiz board game, knew all the answers.
Over and over again, she was dominant to the point of silencing my family. It was unnerving for me. A few weeks later, when we visited her family, oh, we don't play games with our daughter. She plays to decimate the competition. I wonder if this person's wife went on to be their family's favorite child, as is often the case with partners. Could go either way after that thrashing. Aziz, a 10-year-old orphan boy in the village of Burkina Faso, built his own ukulele. I would play my ukulele at night for children, and one day he came, so excited to show me the ukulele he built so that he could play with me. He built it with an aluminium can, a wooden board, and 2 pieces of metal wire to have enough tension that it played a note when plucked. Granted, you could only play the one note, but I was so impressed with him. Made it that much sadder knowing he would never go to school and that I had to leave him behind. Found out my little brother, age 12, has a legit photographic memory. He's a big Lord of the Rings fan and knows an abnormal amount about the series. Whenever he answers questions about it, he looks and squints a bit. I ask him about it and it turns out he's just reading the book in his head. He can even jump to random page numbers. He also knows a ridiculous amount of world history. I go to him when I need help with that. Sadly, he's adopted and we don't share the same genes. Lawyer arguing in front of the Supreme Court. He cites something from a law book, stating it can be found on page 84, and one of the justices motions to a clerk to get the book. The justice receives the book and tells the lawyer that no such thing is found on page 84. The lawyer responds, "Perhaps your honor's edition is incorrectly paginated." It was. What is one secret your parents can never know? I was brought up in a pretty religious home. My family had me in theater, choir, youth group, and all kinds of other extracurricular activities to keep me out of trouble, so they trusted me pretty well. One night, I was about 15, my boyfriend at the time had come over to watch movies. The stipulation was that we could lay on the bed and watch the movie, but the door had to be open. After a while, my mum came in to check on us and everything was fine, so she thanked my boyfriend for being a gentleman and shut the door on her way out. Immediately, as if the door shut had triggered some teenage hormone overload, we started making out and fooling around. He slid his hand up my shirt for a bit, but finally having some privacy, I soon directed his hand to my nether bits. Yay, first, not self-stimulated, climax. We never got caught, which was considered a major triumph, and we found ways after that to hook up without my parents knowing. It wasn't until a few months later at my youth's purity ball, yes, we signed pledges and wore rings to signify our abstinence for God and marriage, that my dad delivered this humiliating speech. He told the congregation he was proud of the strong lady I had become, that regardless of having a boyfriend, I stood up to teen peer pressure and hormones, and that he witnessed me deflect an attempt at immoral behavior while watching movies with my boyfriend one night. Apparently the blinds had been open and my bed faced them from in the house. He happened to be walking in from the garage and caught a peek at me removing my boyfriend's hand from under my shirt. I was mortified. The secret he must never know? The night I had my first climax? He thought I deflected my boyfriend from touching me under there, when in reality I was actually redirecting him much further south. It was me who superglued the fridge door shut. I just blamed it on my brother. This is nowhere near as serious as some of the things in this thread, but it's easily my favorite. As a younger brother, you frickin' butthole. As an older brother, I probably would have done the exact same thing, and yes, it probably would have worked. After my sister died, I locked myself in her room and went through everything alone before her friends or my parents went through her stuff to pack it away or give it to her friends. I found nude pictures, empty bottles of alcohol, and a letter she had wrote but I guess never gave to her then boyfriend, telling him the story of how she had been taken advantage of as a younger teenager. I threw everything like that out but kept the letter. It's been 12 years now and I just found the letter again as I was packing up to make room for a baby. I can't bring myself to throw it away. Well, good on you for being that filter. I shudder to think about people going through my crap after I die and finding all my skeletons. Is there an official term for this? Should this be a thing? I need to designate someone to do this, otherwise I'll ruin a lot of memories of me. A lot of people have suggested skin flick buddy. I'd get punched in the face if I went to my best friend and said, "Larry, we've known each other for a long darn time. Let's be skin flick buddies." Surely we can come up with a better term that requires little to no explanation. I suggest the term Halo Maker, because they make sure you're remembered as an angel. I was about 10 and my dad had just painted the boiler room door orange in our basement. My younger brother and I were pushing each other around on a skateboard in the basement and my dad warned us, "Don't you dare hit this door with your skateboard." 15 minutes later and I'm picking my brother up from the ground and looking at a hole in my dad's orange door caused by said skateboard. Definitely not telling Dad. Instead, I grab a piece of orange construction paper and a glue stick to patch the hole. It matched surprisingly well. 27 years later, that construction paper is still holding strong, and I have never heard a word about it from my pop. Later, well, it looks like I just blew my cover just for you people. I texted my mum and asked her to take a photo of the door. It looks like the years have faded it. This happened in my freshman year of high school. One of my friends got a hold of some green herb, and I haven't tried it before, so we have the stupid idea to smoke it. He came along with some other friends of mine. The original plan was go to the forest near my house and to smoke it, but it was cold, so we didn't want to. One of us wanted to smoke it on my porch, but I disagreed. I forget how, but we came up with the dumb idea to hotbox in my bathroom. Keep in mind, my parents were going to be home from work in an hour, and if they found out, my life would be over. We quickly made a crappy bong out of a Gatorade bottle, then removed everything from my bathroom. We lit up the herb and smoked for like 10 minutes. Once we were done, we quickly cleaned the stuff up and emptied a whole Axe bottle in the bathroom. My friends, being high as F, left. I went back upstairs to check the bathroom, and it smelled like flat-out Mary J. I tried to use every possible thing to get the smell out, but it didn't work. I called my parents, they have the same job, and they said they were 15 minutes away. I knew I was effed. Now keep in mind, my parents were extremely strict, and if they caught me, this would be over. This is when I thought the dumbest thing any sane human would think. Burn my bathroom down. So I ended up lighting some towels on fire and trying my hardest to burn the sink area. It ended up catching on fire, but it was slow. I quickly called 911, and 3 minutes later, I see fire trucks outside of my house. They took care of the fire, and my parents came home shocked. Half of my bathroom was charred, and the door knocked down. Fire department said it was probably an electrical current from the outlet that burned a towel. I stayed up that night thinking about how dumb I was and what I just did. To this day, my parents don't know. When you guys went to Hawaii, I put Milo, the cat, down. He was sick, in incredible pain, couldn't eat or drink, couldn't even move to get to the litter box. When you left on vacation, he was too weak to even yowl in pain anymore. I couldn't stand to see that cat in so much pain and so afraid, so I did the only thing I could do to help him. End his life humanely. My parents were 100% against putting down a pet regardless of how much it's suffering, so they'd go beyond mad if they knew this. Well done, commenter. Letting an animal live on in pain like this is terrible, no matter how much it hurts us to see them go. You did the right thing. One time, I dropped an entire roll of toilet paper into the bowl when trying to change it. I didn't want them to know I ruined an entire roll, so I hid it in my closet, and over the course of a few weeks, I would rip away pieces and throw them away. Since some people seem to be assuming my parents were horrible and I was frightened, that's definitely not the case. I was just a dumb kid that was embarrassed about dropping a whole roll in the toilet. That last story was the most innocent response in this thread, and it reminds me of something I did. Once when I was 7 or so, I was playing before bed and somehow frayed the cord of my bedside lamp. So when my mum came in, I told her, and she said, "Okay, we'll fix it/replace the cord in the morning. Just leave it unplugged." I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and forgot that my lamp was broken, so I plugged it back in to be able to see where I was going, and a couple of sparks popped out of the frayed section. Terrified, I quickly unplugged it and ran to the bathroom to get a cup of water and then poured it onto the section of the carpet where the sparks had landed. I must have sat there for half an hour, worried that I was going to start a fire, and I wanted to be sure nothing had happened. I remember sleeping terribly that night, anxious that our house was going to burn down, and going over the evacuation plan we learned how to make in school. My sister and I were reading through my mum's old high school yearbook, and we kept seeing everyone's sign saying something along the lines of, "Congrats, you and X are perfect together." X is not our dad, but we'd never heard X's name mentioned before. After a little more digging, we found out she had married X right out of high school, divorced, and then married our father. Neither of us really cared, but it was still a huge shock she hadn't told us now that we're both in our mid-20s. My dad always tells me I was so whipped by my girlfriend back in high school, and the example he always uses is, "That one time she told me to change out of my sweatshirt." What really happened is that she pointed out the huge white stain that she left on my sweatshirt the night before, and I figured I should change it to avoid awkwardness on our day out with my family. Yeah, I gave my ex hand fun times once on the backseat of my mum's car while his mum was driving. He arrived on one of my sweatshirts, and the next day at school I see my mum wearing it. She was a substitute teacher. Huge white stain on the back of it. Didn't know what to do. My dad thinks I lost my virginity earlier than I actually did. He thought he'd walked in on me post-fun times with my girlfriend at the time, but we'd actually just been play fighting, and the moment he walked in was the moment she decided to put the strap from her top back on her shoulder. After that, I found out my dad's told half the family about this, and despite me trying to tell him that I hadn't done anything, he claims to have believed me, but didn't. So he'll never know when I actually did, because he believes a lie. To answer this particular topic, how to use a computer, apparently. Yes, my mother-in-law is the same way. She keeps getting viruses and asking us to fix it, even though we live 19 hours away, or to buy her a new one. She recently started seeing a guy who's a gamer and has suddenly decided she wants us to buy her a gaming PC, even though the most advanced game she plays is Candy Crush. Mother-in-law calls.
Help! The antivirus says the file I downloaded is a virus and to delete it. What do I do?
You delete it.
But how do I make the antivirus pop-up go away?
You click the little X.
But you said never to touch it.
Just close it and delete the file.
No, but you said if I touch it, I'll get viruses. I'm just going to get another computer.
I'm sorry for hijacking this topic for, old people can't use computers thread, but it made me laugh and I'm not sure that these posts are elsewhere. Blame the people who wrote them. That one of my childhood friends and I used to play with each other's willies. It was fun and we liked it. I'm a married, straight guy, but this information would shorten their lifespan undoubtedly. I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations are up on this one, so why not? I was a junior in high school and had some friends into LAN parties who were seniors, but I couldn't really join them because my family was pretty poor and neither of them could afford a computer for me to use at that time. So one day, my older friends give me one of their older PCs, a Pentium 3, with a couple of parts missing, RAM, hard drive, that I could build out for myself. Now, about 15 years later, it's turned out to be a great jumping off point because now I'm a successful system administrator and love working in the IT field. And I owe it in many ways to that first computer I learned to build back up from scratch and make my own. Only, they didn't give me that computer, we stole it from the high school. Sorry, not sorry. I totaled my first car when I was 16. They knew about that. They came to pick me up and talked to the police officer while I was moving things from my car to theirs. What they didn't know about was the liter of vodka in my trunk, which I quickly and quietly speedwalked to my parents' truck. Neither the cop nor my parents knew a thing. I very nearly crapped my pants. Disclaimer, I did not drink and drive. The trunk was just the only place my parents never checked, and I happened to be a rowdy teenager. I can never tell mine that my number one goal as a parent is to handle relationship issues differently than they did. They went through an extremely messy divorce when I was 8, and my only memory of them together is them screaming at each other, and my sister and I hiding in our rooms. Then it was 10 plus years of them talking crap about each other to us, putting us in the middle of all their arguments, and giving us a huge guilt trip whenever they felt like we were spending more time with the other one than with them. It's been 20 years now, and my mum will still talk crap about my dad and stepmom every once in a while, despite me asking her over and over to stop. I'm happily married, but if I were to ever get divorced, I will never put my daughter in the middle of arguments, or speak badly about her father to her, or make her feel guilty about having a relationship with him. It's the number one thing I learned from my parents, and I think they would be devastated to realize the true effect it's had on me. I was taken advantage of, as a child, by a babysitter 10 years older than I was. My parents were trying to help her out because she was having issues in her abusive home. Her father was then tossed in jail. This went on, from what I can remember, for at least 2 years. I was 4 to 5 years old. I didn't tell anyone until I started dating at 14. My parents do not know because, A, they were trying to help her and I felt sorry for her. But for a preschooler's mind, it didn't work that way. By the time I felt I could say something, so much time had passed that all I could see happening was me hurting my parents, making them blame themselves. Why do that? I see this person from time to time in passing at the supermarket. We have mutual acquaintances. People bring her up. That bothers me. I don't care about what's happening in her life. I think she was going through some messed up crap and passed it on. I feel sorry for her. When I see her, I look in the eye and stand strong, almost to say, you know what you did, and I am not broken because of it. When I was in elementary school, I was at Target with my mom and sister. At the checkout counter, I saw these cinnamon-flavored Tic Tacs, and I had to have them because I hadn't fully developed the whole want or need function in my brain. I knew my mom wouldn't buy them for me, so I grabbed them, sneakily, and put them in my pocket, sneakily. I felt pretty guilty the whole way home and didn't make eye contact with anyone in case they could read my mind. As soon as I was inside the safety of my home, I made my way upstairs, sneakily, and opened my hot goods. They were awful. Easily my least favorite Tic Tac. I ended up throwing them in the garbage can outside, sneakily, to avoid any suspicion. This is my shame and I carry it alone, except now with theoretically thousands of people. I wonder how common it is for kids to have nicked candy from stores growing up. I know I did once, and I felt terrible about it afterwards as well. When I was about 10, I discovered the ability to jerk in my gherkin. Oh, those were great times, tugging in the shower. I soon discovered the vast world of the internet and its dark places. One day, I decided to start going at it in my room. Well, it was about time to finish up, and had nowhere to shoot. So, I splooged on the floor and rubbed it in. No big deal, right? Our carpet was an off-white, so when I rubbed it in, it would just disappear. I did this for 10 years, people. I had no idea how that stuff smelled. I guess neither did my parents. One day, they started to notice the stench. They chalked it up to my dog always laying in my room, and my friends having really stanky feet. As did I. One day, I got curious after learning splooge glows under a black light. Borrowed my brother's black light, went to my room, closed the door, flipped the switch, and... holy crap. The carpet in my room was brighter than the morning sun. I noped the frick out of there with that black light, and buried that memory to this day. 4 years later, my girlfriend starts going on and on about how splooge smells like a dirty wet dog, and feet after it's dry, and it clicks. My room stank of splooge for years. That's a dirty secret I'll take to the grave. I signed a lease for an apartment in Florida before I came back home from my internship down at Disney. I came back home and never went back down. I paid for it for a year. My roommates wouldn't let me have someone else sublease. It was a horrible situation and I screwed up. I don't need to hear from my parents how stupid and young I was. Oy. When I was about 11 or 12, I was going through my pyromaniac stage. One Saturday, I decided I would grab a steel can and fill it with gasoline and head to the woods. Now, this wasn't just your typical old can of SpaghettiOs. It was a 1-gallon bulk-sized can, filled to the brim. I took it to the woods and decided it would be cool to just light it on fire and see what would happen. I lit it and it caught like I expected and kept burning inside the can. After about 15 minutes, I got bored and went to try and put it out. In the process, I knocked the can over, spreading gasoline all over the forest floor, and it erupted in a ball of flame. I quickly ran back to my house to get water and come running back with about 5 gallons. By this point, the fire had spread tremendously and my efforts were useless. I decided my best bet would be to run inside and play video games. Luckily, this spot in the woods was pretty good ways away from my parents' house, so it didn't draw my parents' attention immediately. After about an hour or so, the entire fire department is on the scene battling the 3 to 4 acres of forest fire that is roaring. There was a road that runs behind my house, and the fire basically engulfed all of the forest separating my parents' house and the road. This road is notorious for substance dealers and crystal houses. While the firefighters are trying to battle the flames, it's discovered that the house closest to the fire is actually a rather large lab house, and the cops show up and a huge bust goes down. Naturally, the fire was blamed on them, and my parents just accepted that. It's now 20 years later, and my parents still do not know, nor will they ever know. In conclusion, set fire to 3 to 4 acres of woods, Crystal House got blamed, parents will never know. My sister, stepbrother, and I are all adults now, ranging from mid-20s to early 30s. I was the oldest, so I had already moved out by the time my sister was a teenager. We were all out to dinner with our parents recently, exchanging funny stories back and forth, and then this came up. Stepbrother, to my sister, I guess we're all old enough for this story now. So, remember how you would call me to see if our parents were awake yet? Sister, we are not old enough for that story. That's where it ended, but I assume my sister was sneaking out at night and calling my stepbrother in the morning to see if it was safe to sneak back in, and despite being in her late 20s now, still doesn't want my parents to know about it. I was sure you were going to say they were sleeping with each other. I felt absolutely the same as that last commenter I just quoted, and I'm relieved to be proven wrong. Maybe it's a filthy mind thing. I spent the night in jail for possession of Mary J. 5 years ago. Not a big deal really, but it would kill my mum if she found out I'd been in a jail cell. That I was the one that blew up the toilet. To this day, my stepdad thinks someone broke into my house, smashed the toilet, and left. I'm not that close to my parents, but as an adult, I'm a lot mellower and recognize the fact that they're nice people who did their best. So there's nothing that would be catastrophic for me if they found out, but I'd be a little glum about the unnecessary trauma it had put them through if they ever found out how many people I've slept with, how many of them were dudes, or the sheer quantity of illegal substances I did at one point. That party I threw in high school when you guys were out of town for the weekend that you found out about due to my snitch butt neighbors. It wasn't just some guys drinking beer and playing poker. It was actually an illegal substance-fueled swingers party. And yes, your bed was used. When we were staying at a friend's place on holiday, my significant other and I accidentally broke her guest bed. Like one of the legs gave way and the whole thing collapsed. It was an ultra-cheap metal frame, and significant other found a meat cleaver, and we banged the bejesus out of that bed to get it back into shape, to no avail. I had to ring my friend and confess. Due to the conservative nature of my parents and their firm beliefs, we have allowed them to believe that we are chaste and good and would never actually have sex. Ew, gross. We've never lied, but we've certainly been guilty of omission. We're getting married this year, and my friend with the broken bed is a bridesmaid and is working on her speech. People who have snapped on a bully at school, what's your story? I was 7, and I was a nice kid with average grades, and this one bully that was taller than me. He used to be any typical bully, like trip you up on your lunch, push your head for no apparent reason. I was getting annoyed, and I felt the red heat go all over my body. I looked at him and told him to stop. I looked at him, he pushes me to the ground. I stopped and kicked his shins and punched his nose with all my force. His nose started to bleed, and I was sent to the office. My mum had this thing where if they started it, she'll pretend she's mad at me at school and then come home saying, "Congrats." My dad said the same kind of thing. "Don't throw the first punch, but throw the last," was one of his favorite lines. In my high school years, one friend started calling another a name he didn't like. Friend 2 gets angry enough about it that he actually starts to assault friend 1. Seeing this, I step in to stop friend 2 and turn to friend 1 and tell him to go to class. Tell friend 2 to do the same. Their first classes were on opposite ends of the building. Friend 2 decides to throw a punch at me, trying to get me out of the way. I proceed to pull some Matrix-like crap, sidestepping the punch, grab his wrist, pulling down and behind him, pin it against his back, and grip his forehead from behind, pulling it forward, till he can see me behind him. Essentially completely locked down at this point. From here I ask him, "You want to keep playing? 'Cause I can keep this up." He gave up shortly after that. Important to note that friend 1 was a scrawny 100 pounds at most, and friend 2 was over 300, while I was about his height and around 180 pounds. Also later found out that friend 2 and a different friend had been bullying friend 1 for quite some time before this. 5th grade, this dude who always picked on me was kicking my seat in an assembly, and I was having a terrible week and this was my last straw. I turned, punched him in the face, but I wasn't satisfied with the first punch because it felt so weak, so I figure I'm already going to be in trouble, so I went back for a second, better punch that felt worth getting in trouble over. Also, this was a DARE assembly, which was about saying no to substances and violence, so I basically learned nothing. I smashed a kid across the face with a stapler because he hit me all the time and I got tired of it. I was in 7th grade. Didn't get caught. I hit one of the nastiest people in my school with a small desk used for the bad kids. When they get in trouble. You know, the one sitting in the corner that's really uncomfortable. Yeah, I just slammed the F word in the face with it. Got 2 weeks of work detail for it, but it was worth it. Work detail? Did you go to school at a prison, or is this an America thing? I was being bullied for like a month when I was 13 or 14. Some guy from my class started messing with me, pushing, hair grabbing, neck slapping, stuff like that, and I didn't really know how to handle it. One of his friends from another class, a guy I had never spoken to before, tried it once and I instinctively punched him in the face. Bullying stopped. If that random guy didn't do what he did, I don't know how I would have put an end to it, to be honest. My bully in France decided to sit next to me in class and repeatedly whispered insults to me, and at one point, I snapped, took his head and bashed it into the desk. I think I would have been in deep crap had his textbook not been there. Needless to say, I got kicked out of that class and had to change English group. Couple of bullies like to do monkey in the middle with me. Didn't take me long to figure out the solution was to simply tackle one of the bullies and start punching. Haha, they actually played the Russian roulette. 6th grade, a few days before end of school year. Beat the crap out of him and didn't even stop with teachers saying so. The bully stopped, but I was sick and tired of his crap. Lucky me, I didn't have to come into school for those remaining 3 days. Best of all was that my parents were on my side. When I was younger, my sister was getting bullied by some buttheads I knew, and I was too young to do anything. My dad got teed off and went into the school. He grabbed one of them by the neck and pushed him against a wall, while his great friends ran away like little girls. End of the story, they never got close to me or my sister ever again. I know it's kind of messed up for a grown man to do that, but the school wasn't solving the problem and it was getting worse every day. For context, I'm 6'5" and have been since high school. There was a girl I was friends with who had a boyfriend. There was nothing going on between us, but her boyfriend was older and used to call me names and throw crap at me in the halls. I'm not a particularly confrontational person, so I let it go on like that for a while. There was a day when he knocked my books out of my hand and I'd had enough. He wasn't nearly as big as I was, so I picked him up by his shirt and slammed him against the locker. The bullying stopped. I was 11, he was 9, but he beat up my 6-year-old sister on the bus home one day, and none of the adults would do anything about it. So after we got off the bus, I kicked his butt. He never bothered my sister or any other kid again. One of my most vivid memories of my youth. When I was 9, my babysitter's granddaughter took me next door to play on her friend's swing set. For some reason, her friend's little brother got really teed off that I was on his property. No idea what the frick his problem was. I think he was just having a bad day and needed to take it out on someone. Anyway, instead of leaving like the brat told me to, I just kind of stood there staring at my babysitter's granddaughter, and her friend is like, "Is it okay that we're over here?" This ticks the brat off more, and he storms over and punches me in the stomach. Should not have been a big deal, the kid was like 6 and I was like 9, but I happened to be standing at the edge of a small cliff above a drain ditch, and he managed to knock me back into the mud. And I had to go back to my babysitter's, take off my dress and underpants and put on some of her granddaughter's clothes. I wasn't hurt, but it was really embarrassing. When my stepdad came to pick me up, the babysitter told him what happened. My stepdad didn't have an expression on his face after hearing about this. He calmly went next door where the little brat was sitting on the front porch, being a brat, and asked, calm as frick with his arms folded, "Did you hit my girl?" The little boy's face went white. My stepdad's a big machines guy and probably looked like a giant to this kid. Brat didn't answer. My stepdad asked him again. The kid looked down and nodded. My stepdad, still fricking monotone, responded, "You ever go near my girl again, and you'll be lucky if I just knock on that door and get your parents out here." Then, my stepdad just turned around and came back over and took me home. I have never felt more loved. Interestingly, my babysitter's granddaughter wasn't allowed to bring me with her to her friend's house after that. There was a girl who always called me dumb or stupid for really no reason, from elementary school all the way to high school. Until one day, I finally told her that if she had nothing nice to say, then don't say anything at all. She was quiet after that and stopped doing it. Years later now, I think she maybe liked me in some weird way. A group of boys thought it was hilarious to keep our football and stop us from getting it back after it rolled towards them on the school field. They kept passing it between themselves and picking it up and trying to keep it away from us. After trying for about a minute to get the ball from them by running after it, one of them picked the ball up and kept moving it away, trying to keep it out of my reach. I took a few steps back, no longer interested in trying to not hurt them, and did a goal kick on the ball. I kicked his hand in the process, and the ball smacked him in the face and gave him a bloody nose. He didn't even try to react, he just turned and walked away with his tail between his legs. The bully would always grab my butt or slap my neck, say rude things about my nationality, and insult me. I often told him to stop that, but he never did, for a year and a half. Once in a lecture, he came to my desk and grabbed my butt. I'd had a really bad day that day too. The moment he grabbed my butt, I saw red and I was mad. I stood up and looked him in the eye, I took his head and smashed it against the wall with all I had. Nothing serious happened to him, except for the teacher being mad at him for bothering me. I was quiet and good-hearted kid, and the teacher knew that. By the way, I'm a guy, and that butthole wasn't even gay himself. Or maybe he was, but he never admitted it. I'd been bullied all year long by this guy, and it was the last week of 8th or 9th grade. Comes up to me and says some crap about my clothes or something, and I just saw red. I turned around and hit him with a palm strike to the face. The bottom of my hand connected right under his nose. He doubled over and I bolted. I heard later his lip got stuck on his braces and he had to go to the doctor to fix it. I got a stern talking to about not hitting people, although my teachers were aware of the verbal bullying. I will put up with a lot of things, sir, but I will not stand for fashion-related insults. Have at thee. Not at school, but I was 12 and a kid on my block constantly challenged me to fight him because he knew I didn't want to, so it was a great way for this chubby, incompetent brat to show off. One day, outside the convenience store, to his surprise, I accepted. He came towards me and I basically lifted my leg and kicked him in the stomach. Honestly, he just bounced off my foot. In shock, he came at me again. This repeated about 3 times as the expression of disbelief in his face became more pathetically pronounced. He finally gave up and ran home past my house, telling my mother, who happens to be outside, that I beat him up. But she already knew about his behavior towards me, so as soon as I explained what happened, it was all good. He wasn't actually hurt physically, just emotionally. We both learned a good lesson that day, and he actually grew up to be a decent guy from what I could tell. In middle school, we were hanging out around before classes started, and this guy who used to be my friend came up behind me and put a condom in my mouth. I turned around, pushed him up against the wall, and punched him in the face. The whole school heard about it, and they were all backing me up for the rest of the day. I didn't even get in trouble. He was super embarrassed and tried to negotiate it with me, saying, "You have to let me punch you back to make up for it," or save his honor or some crap. People would not stop teasing him about it. I think that when the teachers heard about this, they thought it was funny, and I had a good rep with them, so they let it slide. 5th grade. Can't remember what specifically caused me to snap, but after spending the last 5 years being continually harassed, bullied, and assaulted by a specific boy, I'd had enough. I calmly walked back to the mounted pencil sharpener at the back of the class and sharpened my pencil to a very fine tip. Then I walked behind said bully and in a downward motion slashed him across the entirety of his back with one fluid motion. Obviously, I got in a truckload of crap for what I did. Principal insinuated to my mother that the parents of the other boy may want to press charges for my harming of their pride and joy. My mother, bless her heart, retorted back, "If that's the case, perhaps I should press charges, considering how often my son has been coming home with cuts, bruises, and welts administered at that boy's hands without repercussions from your staff." The principal moonwalked out of that conversation so freaking fast. I still was read the riot act at home though, got drilled into me that what I did was used a weapon to harm someone and that it would never be tolerated at any level. Grounded for a very, very long time. Bully gave me space, for a while anyway, went back to his usual torment after a couple of weeks, minus any physical contact. High school. One girl made my life hell. I didn't even know her or fully understand why she targeted me. She tried to run me over and told cops I walked in front of her car. One day, walking up the stairs, she proceeded to taunt me, hitting me in the back with objects and calling me names. I stopped, turned around, and punched her in the nose. She landed on her back on the landing. I just stood over her and said, "What now, B-word?" She never said one word to me after that. This happened to me in 8th grade. I was bullied from the beginning of the 7th grade, and one day, I decided to report him. I got bullied for reporting the bully. I got so mad that one day after church, I beat him up in the parking lot. I made sure I didn't beat him up enough to call an ambulance, but enough to hurt. He didn't mess with me from then onwards. I find it ironic that you beat him up after attending church, lol. Turn the other cheek with your fist. I didn't snap at a bully, but I did snap at a teacher who didn't do anything no matter how many times I told her I was being bullied. All my bullies, their parents were on the parent council. They got funding for field trips and things like that, so the kids were basically untouchable. I yelled at the teachers, telling her what they've done to me, things like taking my school supplies, excluding me from activities, calling me names, and throwing things at me, along with other things. I told them how I was sick and tired of being blamed, that it was my fault. I had no friends when every other single bully told people to avoid me. They invented this thing called Katie Touch. Like the cheese touch, but you could get the Katie touch if you talked to me. I finished it by telling her that she was stupid and was too worried about losing school funding, so that she didn't care what happened to her students. No one backed me up and nothing changed. I got a 3-day in-school suspension and the bullying got worse. Kids would take my lunch and shoes, so I'd get in trouble for not wearing my indoor shoes, and I passed out one time from hunger and dehydration from not eating. I hated that school, and I'm so glad I went to a junior high that didn't have anyone else there from my old elementary. To all teachers, just because a kid is playing by themselves, it doesn't mean that they like it that way. Also, if a kid tells you they're being bullied, then do something about it. Yeah, it seems like a lot of these kids seem to have a policy of doing nothing about the bullying and punishing the kids for fighting back. My sister was bullied ruthlessly throughout middle school. Nearly drove her to take her own life, it got so bad. Her teachers and coaches did nothing despite my sister and my parents confronting them many, many times. She ended up going to a private high school much further away so that she could avoid all of those girls in high school. She ended up becoming a teacher and is such a huge anti-bullying advocate. None of this fake zero-tolerance bullcrap. If she finds a student being a bully, she makes sure they get severely punished and she puts her own neck on the line to protect the victim. She had the superintendent's kid suspended for a week for bullying. Yeah, that kid should be untouchable. She's freaking awesome. Amazing teacher and amazing support for her students. She has changed the lives of so many of her students. I was severely bullied from my earliest memory all the way through high school. The times I remember snapping were these. 3rd grade, we were putting the chairs upside down onto the desks at the end of the day, and this kid kept pushing my chair and pushing me. I turned around and shoved him as hard as I could with both hands, and he fell onto the desk behind him. The chair fell off, he fell onto the chair, and I got in trouble. 4th grade, at some Boy Scout thing and there were sodas. I got one out of the cooler, and a kid who bullied me a lot grabbed it out of my hand and walked away. I grabbed another one and threw it at the back of his head. I got in trouble, of course. 7th or 8th grade, after being bullied incessantly, I lost it and was crying and screaming and punching the lockers, and got in trouble for denting a couple of them. 9th or 10th grade, while on the bus, one of the bullies grabbed my comb out of my back pocket. He had messed with me a lot. Rather than punching, for some reason I used my open hand to slap him really hard on top of his head. He was seated and I was standing in the aisle. He complained of his neck hurting from it, and I got in trouble. Between each of these instances, I'd put up with constant bullying every day and do nothing, and no teachers gave a crap. Bullies got away with bullying all the time, but even if I simply said, "Leave me alone," with a loud voice, I was in trouble. It never made sense to me. Beat mine with a hockey stick one day after school. We were playing road hockey, he lived down the street. He just kept going, and to be honest, I saw red. I remember my dad pulling me off while I was slamming my wooden goalie stick into his side while he tried to cover his bleeding face. His parents never pursued anything, and my parents took me to counseling. He ended up nearly killing his best friend in a drinking and driving accident. Friend was never the same, he was permanently injured. The bully took his own life a few years later after he didn't make a junior hockey team. I still feel bad. I've never been in any violent interaction before or since. Now as an adult and an educator, I know he was really likely just hurting. I'm sorry, Justin. The only way we improve as a great community is to role model how to be human, and that includes mistakes, regrets, and sorrow, as much as it includes successes, celebrations, and happiness. Keep sharing it all. We all learn from our shared stories. This was in 7th grade, I think. I threw a shoe at him in a changing room. He was just picking on some random kid, and I'd had enough of his crap. I completely missed him and hit the guy that he was picking on right in the face. Everyone froze for a second and then burst into laughter, and the guy who was being picked on started crying, and I felt terrible because I meant to hit the bully. Shoes are hard to throw accurately, I guess. I tried to tell him that it was for the bully, and I guess I calmed him down a bit, also by apologizing profusely. After the incident, the mood in the changing room was lightened and everyone started being a bit more chill with each other, so I guess it was a success. This wasn't me, but a quiet kid at school one of the bullies was picking on. The quiet kid never reacted, even when the bully punched him. This went on for months, and the bully was always trying to get this guy to fight him, and the kid always said, "I don't want to fight you." Then one day, the bully broke this guy's art project on purpose. He was about to hand it in to be marked, and the kid snapped. He belted the absolute crap out of this bully. We actually had to jump in and break it up because he was going to kill the guy and didn't look like stopping. I will never forget the bully turning up at school a few days later, and his face was so swollen and one eye was completely closed, and black and blue from all the punches he took to the face. I learnt 2 things that day. Bullies are cowards, and always be wary of the quiet ones. There are 3 things all wise men fear: The sea and storm, a night with no moon, and the anger of a gentle man. Patrick Rothfuss. In 4th grade, this kid named Nick used to punch me every day at recess. I went home one day crying about it, and my dad told me to punch him back. So the next day, when Nick came around to punch me, I whipped around and just beat the crap out of him. Absolutely wailed on him. One of the teachers noticed and took us to the principal's office, and we got off with warnings. After that, Nick never punched me again, but would make sure I could get to the front of the line for the drinking fountain and picked me first for any sports game he was team captain for. Good story, but what a lousy dad. Report stuff like this to the school and let violence be the last defensive resort. Year 7, so I was 12. Part of the bullying included this other girl being a butthead about getting into our lockers. She had the one next to me, and they were both on the ground, so we'd have to put our bags on the floor when we wanted to get into them. If she got there first, then I had to wait for her to finish before I could get to mine. But if I was there first, then she'd shove my bag out of the way and wouldn't be patient at all. It sounds unimportant now, but this wasn't the only thing that was going on. One day she grabbed my bag and shoved it out of the way like normal, and I snapped. I yelled at her, explaining exactly how she had been being unfair and that she needed to take a fricking decision on which way it was going to work and then stick to it. She and her friend literally had their mouths hanging open in shock, which is a sight I'll never forget, and the lockers stopped being an issue after that. She decided on patience rather than shoving bags out of the way. I wish I'd lost my crap at the bullies more often. Maybe the rest of it would have stopped sooner. So I grew up moving around a lot with mum and dad. Unfortunately, that meant me being the new kid quite a bit. I was a pretty awkward kid, but generally managed to make friends. Except one particular school. I was there for 3 years, which is the longest run at one elementary school I have ever had. Anyways, the popular girls would bully me constantly. I was about 50 pounds, soaking wet when I was younger, and was on average skinnier than most. They would call me anorexic and ask why my parents starved me, etc. They didn't, my parents were, and still are, amazing. But one day, the popular girl asked me to give her a push on the gliders. You'd hang onto a T-bar and push off from one, but platform to the next. Well, I pushed her, really hard, and she fell off and broke her arm. I transferred schools the next week. I was about 8, and punched one of my bullies in the throat. Nearly fricking passed out too, the little B-word. Lawyers, what is the dumbest thing your client has ever done? Mine wore a shirt that said, "Natural Born Killer," into a hearing. For an assault charge. I had him turn it inside out. He went down anyway, but at least it was for, actually assaulting someone rather than the shirt. Cashed in their retirement while in bankruptcy. When it's in cash, it's not protected. My all-time favorite is a client I had who was charged with DUI, who wanted to challenge the charges on the grounds that he didn't think he was drunk and the tests were administered properly. Guess who appeared at his court hearings rip-roaring drunk twice? And then, both times, he got into his car and tried to drive away. And both times, the police promptly stopped him, administered a breathalyzer, and charged him with DUI and related offenses. We didn't win that case. I was in court contesting a traffic ticket and saw something like this. The guy was in court for a DUI and was 7 sheets to the wind. He was taken out in shackles. Fell over twice. Oof, I mean, these just sound like alcoholics. I hope they both got the AA attendance included in the sentencing. Told the client, don't say anything to the police, wait until I get there. He confesses to a crime he isn't even being investigated for. This was relayed to me by the RP manager of the office supply chain I worked for in high school. Individual stores didn't have RP managers, they existed at the district level. A young man, let's call him Eric, had been with the company for almost a year. He worked in office supplies and was by this time known to management to have light fingers. At some point, the store manager called in young Eric to his office to discuss his continued employment with the company. When Eric entered the room, there was a strange man who was introduced as the RP manager for the district. The conversation from the RP manager was very short, hoping to elicit a confession to the pens they knew he had stolen. Eric, we know what's been going on. If you tell us about it, we'll promise not to press charges against you. Eric just about crapped himself and proceeded to spill all the details. The assistant manager was bringing in additional software, packing it in empty boxes of printer paper, and selling the printer paper to his friends, and somehow writing off the software as stolen or returned. Eric's job was just to fetch the boxes from the back when the friends came to pick them up. Not my client, but I was on the prosecutor's side when a defendant failed to appear for court. His attorney can't reach him, nobody knows where he is, so we all sit there for about half an hour until the judge gets sick of it and moves on with the docket. We find out later that day that the defendant decided to rob a 7-Eleven the night before and was sitting in jail 2 counties over when he should have been in court. I used to represent patients who were involuntarily committed because of a mental illness, so I wouldn't describe them as dumb, but still. Clerk, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Client, no. This happened a dozen different times. Had a client show up to child custody hearing, high on crystal. When she arrived, she began screaming at the judge and demanding that her
no good crystal head baby daddy
be drug tested. I took her into the hallway and told her that if the judge ordered a test for the dad, he would have to order one for her. End of argument. I worked for the public defender's office and met a client in jail for a lineup that he had adamantly demanded regarding a crime with multiple witnesses. I met the client for the first time in a separate room to let him know how it would go down and what to expect. This is the kind of lineup you traditionally see on television, where there are a number of similar-looking people standing shoulder to shoulder in front of mirrored glass. They pull the people for the lineup from the jail population, and despite their best efforts, this is not a huge population. I walk in to meet the client, and he has a sty on his lower left eyelid the size of a golf ball. It was the most identifiable mark on a human's face I have ever seen. He still demanded the lineup and was identified instantly by every single witness without a shred of doubt in their mind. He still demanded a trial, and the sty was gone by the time the trial commenced. In conclusion, guy with a golf ball-sized lump on his face demands comparative lineup. Judge was determining if a defendant qualified for a public defender. Judge: Sir, do you have any income? Defendant: Yes, Your Honor. From what source do you have your income?
Selling Mary J., Your Honor.
This happened in Illinois, and the defendant was not under oath.
Honesty is the best policy, unless it involves telling a judge you sell grass for a living.
Agreed. Omission is not technically a lie. Here's another ill-advised admission. When I was sitting for appointments one time, a defendant said hustling as his source of income. Everyone in the courtroom laughed a little, even the judge. I represent clients before the IRS, had a couple who owed around $250,000 in back taxes. We had no defense, so the only thing to do was have the clients meet with the IRS and plead for leniency. Well, the wife got arrogant with the IRS agent and at one point stood up and screamed at the IRS agent, who was a pretty decent person, making a very middle-class wage.
You'll take away my Mercedes over my dead body.
Then she stormed out of the conference room. Needless to say, she lost the Mercedes. Not a lawyer, but this happened in court. My dad was suing a customer for non-payment. The judge ruled in his favor for the whole $15,000. The guy he was suing got up to leave, but walked over to my dad and said, "If you think you're going to see a dime of that money, you're a freaking moron. I will kill you first." He then walked away. For a second, my dad was worried the guy would get away with the threat, but he didn't worry much because the guy said it loud enough for the bailiff and the judge to hear. He did not make it out of the courtroom. My dad was a lawyer in the Navy. One of his first big cases was defending a guy accused of falling asleep at his post during Vietnam. My dad was all psyched, delivering what he thought was a well-prepared defense to the judge. The judge interrupted him, telling him to turn around and wake up his client. This guy might have had some kind of disorder. Your Honor, the defense apparently rests. Accidentally admitted to the crime in his direct examination. Facepalm.
How do you accidentally admit to a crime?
Sir, did you murder that woman?
Yes, I did. Wait, no, frick.
The case had gone on for years. Client was badly injured in a car accident and was about to win millions. Then she posted a Facebook status about her doing something very active and thus negating the entire case. Had to settle for $100,000. Years of work down the drain in one Facebook status.
Attorney, this is Jen from the judge's office. Your client, who I see is charged with harassing phone calls, left us 87 messages over the weekend. The judge would like a word with you. Let's not jump to any conclusions until we've discussed the contents of those calls, people. There's nothing harassing about... Hey, Your Honor, just calling to see what your plans are this weekend. Some of the guys are going to Larry's. You're more than welcome. See ya. Hey, Your Honor, didn't hear back, but wanted to give you a heads up that if you are going to Larry's tonight, you should park a block east of his place. No restrictions on that block. Whoa, Your Honor, there's some major traffic on Maple Street right now. Don't know if there was an accident, but steer clear of that place, big guy. Hey, Your Honor, if you do happen to be headed to Larry's, could you pick up a bag of ice on your way? Thanks, bro. Oh, Your Honor, I'm absolutely crazy. I can't believe I forgot to give you Larry's address. 1955 Crescent. A lot of girls here, by the way. Maybe wear those robes and catch you some strange. Get down here, bro. This client sounds like that ex that everybody has. Finally taken to court. I had a brilliant gentleman on probation for narcotics trafficking and was not permitted to own or use a cell phone. He went in for a substance test with his probation officer, and his cell rang in his pocket. The police officer went to take the phone from his pocket and also pulled out a large bag of white snow that he bought to his substance test. She has a restraining order on you. You absolutely cannot contact her anymore. They moved in together. Fortunately, I was not the attorney in question, but guy is convicted of some traffic-related offenses, loses his driver's license, effective immediately, gets in the car and drives home, along with his lawyer.
Not my client and not my case, but a colleague was defending a driver in a wrongful death case. The first question at his deposition was, "Please state your name for the record." The driver stood up and started screaming at the plaintiff's attorney and threatened to kill him. That went well. Didn't happen to me, but happened to an attorney I know. Client shows up for preliminary hearing on domestic violence petition, is wearing a ratty t-shirt, but his attorney doesn't pay attention to it. Attorney starts arguing and sees the judge turning bright red, fuming with anger. Judge asks the attorney if he spoke with his client about courtroom attire. Attorney looks down. Client is wearing a t-shirt that says, "I have the male organ, so I make the rules." Story is from a friend of mine. He was defending a guy in court. Don't remember what he was charged with. The main witness for prosecution was on the stand and was asked if she could identify the defendant. She was scanning the courtroom and seemed confused. My friend was already silently celebrating because if she couldn't identify him, he could probably get all charges dropped. As he was mentally adding this case to the win file, he happened to glance over at his client, who had just helpfully raised his hand to make it easier for her to identify him. Even the judge facepalmed on that one. My law teacher would tell stories about a juvenile court he used to work in for one of the more questionable areas of California. Apparently, they had a real problem with defendants coming in with sagging pants and court officials showing up in beach clothes. The judge finally got so sick of it that he kept a box of rope for an impromptu belt and a box of neckties behind his desk, and he'd begin court proceedings by lobbing ample amounts of both over his stand at anyone he felt was in need of them. That's gotta be a bit terrifying, a judge throwing you a length of rope and commanding you to use it. The cops in my preliminary hearing showed up in camo shorts and beaters. I was wearing a suit and tie. I know of a judge who will hold you in contempt for showing up dressed inappropriately. Also, he hates, and by hates I mean hates, cell phones ringing during his proceedings. If your cell phone rings, you're immediately held in contempt, and the bailiff immediately handcuffs you and takes you to jail. Ah, the South. That judge seems to enjoy an atmosphere of fear and tension in his courtroom. Dizzy with power. I work as a legal aid lawyer in a Canadian province. I've had many dumb clients who did many dumb things. Wore a smoke grass every day t-shirt while attending their substance trafficking and producing trial. Attempted to smuggle cigarettes to their inmate partner via their baby's diaper. Initially pooped their pants on the way to court to delay their matter. Denied driving under the influence. Upon search by police, a full highball glass of rum and coke was located in their jacket pocket. Committed the unspeakable act on a girl. Sent her text messages from his phone the next day recalling all the sordid details. I have many more stories I could tell if there was sufficient interest. The ones I mentioned here all happened in the past couple of months. More stories. One of my first clients was a delirious hobo. When we were meeting at my office, he was ranting and his dentures fell out and landed on my legal pad. He picked them up and put them back in his mouth and continued to rant as if nothing had happened. Same guy appeared in court a few weeks later and refused to let the security detail inspect his hobo bindle. He told them that he wasn't going to appear without his bindle and left. He was arrested that afternoon for failing to appear. A guy came in and said he wanted to sue Oral-B because their toothbrushes kept cutting his gums. He asked if I wanted to see his evidence. I said no, but he still proceeded to dump a grocery bag of used, slightly bloodied toothbrushes onto my desk. Another good one, during a trial for a client in a circuit court about an hour outside of the city that I operate in, client decides to get a cab out there and tells the driver they'll pay them when they arrive. Client arrives in this community and gets the driver to stop at a local convenience store across the street from the courthouse. Client proceeds to attempt to steal 5 26-ounce bottles of rum and is promptly arrested and taken into custody. Trial is postponed as we spend the day unsuccessfully applying for bail. I'm not a lawyer, but this worked out super well for me. I was hit by this 65-year-old drunk lady, who also happened to be on a substance at the time. The cops knew her husband was a firefighter, so they didn't breathalyze or do any tests and didn't charge her with DUIs. My EMTs had said, "That lady is so drunk, she's going to buy you a ticket to Disney World," which is how I knew that she was drunk at the time of the accident. But I had no proof to bring to the table in the lawsuit, because if the cops didn't charge or make notes, you cannot add it later. So we get to my deposition and she shows up. She argues with me the entire time over my points, and her lawyer keeps having to tell her that she needs to be quiet. Mind you, this lady had ruined my friends' and mine lives. So I was becoming less than patient with her calling me a liar when she got off scot-free. She exclaims to my lawyer, "Even the police report is wrong." "What do you mean that it's wrong?" "It has me coming from the wrong place." "Where were you coming from?" "My friend's bar." "Really? Did you have any drinks at this bar?" Well, yeah." "How many?" "I don't know, and they don't charge me. They just keep refilling my glass." Cue to her lawyer's facepalm as all of this is on tape. Family law case. Judge had asked to interview the minor child in a closed courtroom with no parents. Attorneys couldn't stay. When done, the client re-enters the courtroom to see the child crying and tells the judge that he is fricking retarded. Right up to that point, my client was winning and was about to have the other party's parenting time suspended. The kid had said that the other party abuses him and that he did not want to see that parent anymore. The judge was not pleased. Other party's parenting time suspended. My client has anger management classes ordered, fines, psych testing, and substance testing. During a divorce, the ex-husband claimed that he didn't make much or any money and wasn't able to pay the child support we were asking him to pay. A few hours after receiving this information, he posts a picture on his public Facebook of a wad of cash talking about how ballin' he is. Needless to say, his claim didn't hold up after that. I suppose this whole collection of stories could just be called What Happens When People with No Filter End Up in Court. Acting in their own defense, of course, filed a motion to kiss my butt, in which he required that America at large and one corrupt judge bend over and kiss his butt. The motion was denied. I'm going to allow it. At first appearance, a defendant stood there calmly and quietly when the judge was reading his charges and bond information. When the judge asked if the defendant had any questions, the defendant gave the judge the finger and said, "Frick you motherfucker, go frick yourself," and then proceeded to throw down the microphone and walk away. The judge, who had been on the bench for years, replied, "Well, I guess I'll let you know when my fan club meets." Not a lawyer or in any way educated on law and court proceedings and such, so please forgive my ignorance, but I want to ask something. Say you're in court and your client does something horribly stupid, such as gives evidence incriminating himself accidentally, or confesses. What do you do? Do you just sigh, admit that you've lost, and everything stops there? Or is there any way to salvage that? Just a curious question. It really depends on the situation. 1. Real legal proceedings are rarely like Law and Order. People rarely straight up admit guilt on the stand. I have, however, had a client under oath get straight up caught in having told a lie 2 minutes earlier. Sometimes you ask for a brief recess and see if you can make the case go away. Sometimes you ask for a brief recess and take your client into the witness room and shout at them, then come back in and try to put lipstick on the pig on redirect. For example, you just said on cross that actually it was Y when you said X earlier. Why was that? Oh, sorry, I get confused. And sometimes you can't do a damn thing about it and you're just watching in horror from the counsel table. So I'm a law student, but I work at a volunteer desk that helps people complete the forms for court. The awful part is I can't give any legal advice since I'm not a lawyer, which means I can't tell these people they don't have a case. However, the stories are great. There's the lady who sues celebrities. She asked me to help her sue Robert De Niro. Someone else helped her with a suit for Matthew McConaughey. She was doing it on behalf of her kids and their fathers for in excess of $100 million. She didn't even know how to spell their names. Then there's the guy who's suing DirecTV, CNN, Fox, and who knows else. Apparently he's the one you have to thank for putting color on your TV shows and adding animation. He was suing because they hadn't paid him, ever. Finally, there's a lady who's suing her former employers for giving her too much money on her last paycheck. She told me they did it because they liked her and wanted her to come back. There was maybe $60 extra on the check. She was suing for $10,000. Not a lawyer, but in court for a ticket. Apparently the cop lost the ticket book, so there was no official evidence. The judge said the next 15 on the docket, I was luckily one of these 15, just needed to say not guilty since there was no evidence. One moron got up there and started to argue that he was only going 5 miles per hour over the limit, not 10. The judge looked at him and said, "Son, just say not guilty." The guy again said, "But I wasn't going that fast." The judge laughed and repeated again, "Son, just say 2 words for me, not and guilty." The guy, confused, mumbled not guilty in the form of a question. The judge said, "Case dismissed." Everyone in the courtroom laughed and clapped for him. My high school best friend's father is a lawyer, and I remember him telling me this story years ago. He gets a client who's being charged with a DUI. He asks the client what happened, and the client states that he had 2 drinks, gets stopped, and the police wrongly charged him with driving under the influence. My friend's dad then looked over the evidence as any good lawyer would do. Comes to find out there was video evidence from a dash cam. Awesome. His client on video was visibly drunk, and he described it as being, "You'd be stupid to think he was sober." He was convinced there wasn't much he could do with this. There's icing on the cake though. When the police officer went to give him the breathalyzer, his client is heard stating, "I'm too drunk to use this damn thing." I'm a law student, but I have internship stories. We had a client who was convicted of murdering his stepson. Before passing sentencing, the judge asked if he had anything to say to the court. He replied, "I only effed up when I didn't kill my wife too." Life sentence. Another client, upon being pulled over and being asked if he had any substances or alcohol in the car, voluntarily told the officer that he didn't, but he did have some smack that he sold in his hotel room. He then kindly escorted the officer there and gave it to him. We had a client charged with selling white snow. In order to determine if he qualified for public defender, the judge asked if he had any way to make an income, and he said, "Well, from selling white snow. I bet I can think of more too." My lawyer brother once got a contempt of court charge dismissed against his client by begging for mercy, using a Forrest Gump-like defense. "My client is not a smart man." Immediately after the charge was dismissed, the client turned and in front of the entire court punched my brother in the mouth, yelling, "Who you calling dumb?" Client was promptly rearrested. Teachers who go to high school reunions, what are the most striking stories you've seen? Not a teacher, but a graduate from high school in a crystal-addled city in the South. Actually featured on a list, placing #1 for the most addicted city in Georgia. I can say that everyone who was successful left and stayed gone. According to the Facebook event page, like 10 people went. Possibly related, who pays $60 per ticket to hang out in a school gymnasium for their 10-year reunion? Here, we're number 10 in this alphabetical list of most addicted counties by state. Also not a teacher, but have been out of high school, an all-girls school, for 6 years. At our 5-year reunion, I caught up with a girl who was severely bullied during high school. She fell off a horse in grade 8 while riding competitive and legitimately snapped her spine, and was in a very intense back brace for her entire high school career. And my God, the other girls were so nasty to her. She would get made fun of for her appearance, and there was an incident where someone filmed her in class without her knowledge, and then edited the video to have all these sexual innuendos about her back brace, and it was posted on Facebook. Our principal was also a horrible woman, and when the video got reported to the principal somehow blamed this girl instead of penalizing the bully. She ended up having to stay back a year because her disability was so bad and she couldn't complete her schoolwork and was unable to graduate. She was incredibly religious as well, and the other girls used to make weird Christian incest jokes about her mum having to bathe her because she couldn't bathe herself due to her back brace. Anyway, now she's doing some fancy medical degree in the UK and is pain-free and out of the back brace. She looks amazing, healthy, glowing, and rigorously kicks butt at the gym every day to physically rehabilitate her body. The best part of the story is that she has absolutely no ill will to the girls who bullied her. It upset her at the time, but she didn't let it scar her. She knew that her bullies were obviously insecure and dealing with some inner demons, if they went out of their way to ruin her life. She felt bad for them more than anything. I run into her at the gym all the time, and it's so nice to see her so confident and thriving. Nothing like a great recovery story to lift the spirits from the mire of high school misery. I sat beside this girl Joni in grade 8. She was so smart and really pretty. She would always finish the year with 95% averages, even as high as 98 in some subjects. I was a hooligan, that's why I was seated next to her. She would help me with stuff, always let me copy her homework, peek at tests. There's no way I would have passed without her. The teacher would always say you'll never get anywhere if you just copy Joni all the time. She works the drive-thru at A&W now, and has a herd of children with some skeezy-looking guy who's in and out of jail. Breaks my heart when I see her. So much potential to end up flipping burgers. I always wonder where it went wrong with her. 9 times out of 10, crappy home life. Just finally got to her. Found someone who loved her like she wasn't at home and got pregnant. If you only love you 20%, finding someone who loves you 30% is like winning the lottery. Not a teacher, but about a girl I used to be interested in since elementary school. We were really close friends. I'd even work for her dad when I was a kid. Stuffing envelopes for him to send out to his clients, just basic stuff that he offered us 10 cents per envelope to be a nice guy. In high school, we drifted apart a little, and she started dating another friend of mine who shortly after noped out of that relationship because she wanted him to make her pregnant. Fast forward a couple of years after graduation, and she did have children, who she then suffocated when they were 3 years old and 22 months old, sentenced to over 40 years in jail. She was smart, pretty, and charming, and now she might never see the outside world again. Needless to say, she didn't make it to the 10-year reunion. 13 dead out of 217, class of 11. 2 car wrecks, 1 took their own life, 1 dead soldier, 1 lost at sea, and the rest overdosed. We did a 5-year reunion because we lost like 4 of them during year 4. I swear, staying in your hometown after high school will kill you. Not a teacher, but there was a guy who was a stereotypical jock in high school. Very unemotional, stoic, etc. Then he went into the military and got PTSD. Now he's a hippie and a psychotherapist. The buttheads that graduated my year of 2001 tried to organize our 10-year reunion in 2010. Class of 2001 represent. My wife and I skipped our 10-year because it was literally a pizza party with an open bar and daycare. I'm not flying back for that. After the reunion, there was a big meltdown on the class Facebook page about how everyone was still in the same cliques as teenagers. None of the actually awesome people showed up. Maybe the 20-year will be better. It was not better. Not a teacher, but I went to my 10-year reunion. Back in high school, we had a kid who has Asperger's and was a little weird. He was, however, amazing at the yo-yo, having picked one up during middle school when we had that yo-yo trick assembly. Everyone else had stopped walking the dog in 8th grade. This guy was doing more and more elaborate tricks every day during lunch. He was bullied and teased, but he continued doing what he loved. So at our 10-year reunion, people from every strata of high school popularity there was, including this guy. He was his same old self, but more confident. I asked him if he still yo-yos, and he busted out his custom-made titanium yo-yo that he said he made on a CNC lathe. He then starts to do some tricks, and a large crowd gathered around. It was quite the show. He had gotten very good. When he finished, people clapped and cheered, and even the jockiest dudes from back in the day fist-bumped and told him how badass he was. The most amazing transformation was everyone else. Nobody teased him for being who he was anymore. They now admired him for being so passionate about something. I'm really hoping for a Kevin update one of these days. The narrator hopes this as well. To understand the context of the legend that is Kevin, check out one of our earlier videos, Teachers, what's your "that student definitely isn't going places" moment video. Kevin was a child with what I can only describe as a list of impressive achievements in stupidity. He was very entertaining to hear from, and one wonders how he'd got to 13 years old. In high school, I was pretty good friends with a guy that was a bit overweight, about 6'4", really smart and a bit nerdy. Lost track of him after high school, but then saw him at our 10-year reunion. He was the talk of the reunion. Still tall, but had lost all the weight and was in great shape, and had long hair like Fabio and was a doctor. He showed up with a beautiful wife. He then gave us his contact info and invited us to Atlanta to stay with him in his big house. After the reunion, I tried to get in touch. Contact info didn't work, and through some sleuthing I found out he was neither married nor a doctor. He was still in good shape, can't fake that, but faked everything else.
He was still tall, though. What if he showed up and he was like 5'5"?
Now that's a story. Not really a surprise, but the guy who used to bully me all the time is basically homeless. He refuses to go back to his parents, absolutely nothing wrong with them, he just never got out of the rebel teen phase, and spends his nights either couch surfing at a mate's or sleeping on the streets if no one can take him in. Any job he gets, he stays at until he has enough money for whatever he wants at the time, and then quits. Skates all the time and wants to go pro, but spends all his time smoking green herb and drinking and then crying about his life doesn't go anywhere. People at the reunion were astounded that he had just not changed one bit. He still used the slang words he used back then, and even tried to get his old mates to tease me like they used to, but they didn't because they're all adults now with jobs, and some even have kids. He was kicked out of the venue because he tried to pick a fight with a guy who laughed at him for how he was dressed. 30-year-old man dressed as a teenager. I think it's important to know that this guy and I used to be close friends before he started bullying me. I know his parents weren't horrible because I saw his home life firsthand, and he'd lashed out at them for simple things and treated them both like crap. The worst I can say about them is that they were pushovers when it came to punishing him. There were a couple of guys like that at my 10-year anniversary. Walked in like they owned the place, thought the status quo hadn't changed, then fricked right on out the door and they realized that nobody really gave a crap about high school politics 10 years after the fact. I didn't go to my 20th, but saw the list of dead people. I tried to look them up in my yearbook, but shockingly, every single one of the 7 to 8 people were in the no picture section, which was maybe 5% of the class. So either the yearbook cast a curse, or there's some correlation between not being able, or not wanting to take a yearbook picture, and dying young. I have a few. One guy was the star pupil. Smart, handsome, athletic, everything. Dating the head cheerleader. Some Hallmark movie crap. They leave to go off to college, and nobody thinks it'll go wrong. Come 10 years later, she divorced him, was given the house his late grandfather built in the divorce, and lived in there with her new lover while he was in a hotel. 10-year reunion happens, he's deathly skinny and depressed. Sees the school, remembers the memories he had, goes home after reunion, and takes his own life, leaving behind 2 little girls. His ex got chased out of the community last year. Death threats against her and her lover. She's trying to get back in contact with people now, because the lover took her money and fled back to the Philippines, and she's now homeless. I'm a middle school teacher of over 10 years, so some of my students are high school and college graduates at this point. I'm happy to say that a good number of them have reached out to me to share life stories and updates. The one student that came to mind was confidentially severely depressed from a broken home with identity issues and wanted to take her own life. She came to me for help, and we found spoken word poetry as an outlet for her emotions, anxiety, and discovery of self-worth. She's currently returning to high school to finish her associate's degree, and she was the first in her family to graduate high school. I get updates from her on my birthday each year. She still writes and performs spoken word poetry in her spare time. A former student of mine grew up in an ultra-conservative home. He and his siblings were never allowed to socialize with other students during lunch and recess. Whenever they had free time at school, they had to read their Bibles. In science class, they were forbidden to learn about evolution. Every essay, short story, personal narrative, and poem he wrote for me involved some kind of Christian theme. When he graduated, he immediately enrolled in a big seminary in our area, and that was the last I heard of him until his class invited me to their 10-year reunion. This same kid showed up with sleeve tattoos, piercings everywhere, slamming beer after beer after beer, and smoking like a locomotive. When I asked what he was doing now, he responded he currently worked as a bouncer at a strip club. You know what? I think the transition for this guy was probably at the very least a very interesting story. I hope this guy is happy with his new life. A frustrating thing as a teacher is not being able to remember all the kids you've taught. I've taught roughly 150 kids a year for 15 years, so it becomes hard to remember specific things about every student. I feel like a D-bag when a kid who really enjoyed my class comes up and asks me questions about life or the class he or she was in, and I can't remember much about it. I found that I usually remember high-achieving or creative